So I saw the new Spider-Verse movie
So did I.
yesterday, last night, in fact, because work is stressful and I was like, I need a break from work. And so I went and saw that. And it was incredible. I love Into the Spider-Verse, and especially with sequels, you're like, I don't know how they're gonna live up to the original when the original is like so loved and everything.
Right. Yeah.
And
always.
I was trying not to have high expectations, but I had very high expectations, and the movie still blew them out of the water.
Hey.
That's good to
Same.
hear.
Like, Spider-Verse changed the animation industry in a big way, and this pushed it even further.
Yeah.
Everything looks absolutely incredible, and it's gorgeous, and it oozes style, and there's just so many like little things to love, and it's just so fucking good.
It was really, really good. It's definitely worth seeing in theaters. I'm gonna see it a second time.
Mm-hmm.
It's darker than the first one, I would go so far as to say.
Mhm.
The soundtrack isn't as iconic. It does try and replicate a couple iconic moments from the first one. My big thing, I think, is if I get the chance to when I go see it again, I'm probably going to see if I can get some kind of screen reader or caption thing, because the dialogue mixing
Oh no.
is there's a lot of scenes where characters talk and it overlaps, and they're like all saying like really interesting and funny things, and I can't even kind of track which one I want to be listening to. But other than that, and obviously flashing lights, that's just a thing with this series. So, but other than that, literally, awe-inspiring. A lot of the style decisions for different characters were like just groundbreakingly gorgeous. The stuff that they did with the style in the first one was fun, and in this one it feels like since it had gone so well and they had proven that like it was worth doing something artistic with this series, they went even further with this one, and it was really, really, really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's good to hear. I haven't seen it yet, so.
The only downside for me was when I watched it, there were a bunch of little kids right next to me that kept talking.
No.
And one turned on their chair to talk to their friend and farted like right in my fucking face.
Oh my god.
You know how they have like the 4D experience?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, no.
And so I'm looking forward to seeing. I still very much enjoyed the movie, but I'm looking forward to seeing it again. Because especially it's like a pretty long movie too. And so especially like as I was getting past the midway point, the kids were getting really antsy and started like kind of running around and doing other things. So I'm seeing it again on Friday with some friends / coworkers where we're having like my going away party at like a bar once they get off work. And then afterwards, I'm just taking like a smaller group of them to go see Spider-Verse.
Nice.
Hell
It's
yeah.
going to be great.
That's cool.
I'm going to sit in the middle of all of them so I don't have to deal with strangers.
That's so
Yep,
valid.
yep.
I sat dead in the middle of my group, and I'm sure we were the ones that because I was sat right next to my
Did you
friend.
fart in anybody's face?
No, I didn't. Can't speak
Damn.
for my other friends, but I know I didn't. But I do know, I saw a TikTok that was like me watching Spider-Verse, and it's a little cartoon character like barking and getting increasingly more irate with each new like Spider-Man that comes on screen, and that was literally my friend I was sitting next to. Like Spider-Man India like
So
enters
good.
the shot, and she's like losing her shit.
So
And like
good.
you knew he was gonna be here. He was in all the promotional material, but she was acting like she had no idea. It was adorable. I love seeing movies with her. She's the light of my life.
Incredible. Iconic, even.
That's a very good ghoul to gab.
Yeah.
It is.
That was a ghoul to gab.
Anyone else got any ghouls? I feel like I have one, but I really don't remember what it was.
Can we get a quick rapid fire Nina's takes on the Fast and Furious movies they've seen so far?
Yes, you can. I would love to do that. Okay, so I've seen the first 4 and the first 10 minutes of 5, so I'll stick to the first 4. 1, good setup, solid movie. I've watched some heist and action movies recently with Noah from the same era, so it wasn't anything really surprising. I had a lot spoiled for me because I've seen the trailers for these movies for my whole life. So there were certain things that did not catch me off guard. Somehow I had missed the plot point that Brian is a fucking cop, so that reveal did hit me. Other than that, I was like, not enough Michelle Rodriguez.
Never.
And other than that, it was fine. I also not the gayest one yet. A lot of focus on the sister Brian relationship, and I didn't care for it. Second movie, better. I actually liked this one more, even though Vin Diesel wasn't in it. I like Roman as a character a lot. Very James Bond. Very James Bond. It felt like Brian goes on a Bond mission to get his badge back, and it was fine.
Oh, so it's kind of like License to Kill.
Yeah, no, it's very similar.
Yeah.
except there's none of the revenge mission aspect to it.
Oh, the revenge is the cool part, though. Yeah.
No, yeah, there's some tension about backstory stuff. It's nothing special. Tokyo Drift suck.
What?
Sean,
excuse me?
Sean looks like he's literally 40, and everyone's like, this 16-year-old
Oh my God, you're right.
boy.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm
that
wrong. When I watched it, I remember his accent being terrible.
It's pretty bad.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. I didn't like his accent. I didn't like that the love interest is we have this movie set in Japan, and then most of the main characters, all 3 of our main protagonists are not Japanese. Han's Korean. So it's it's a little frustrating to me, which is just a theme with these movies. These movies, I was telling my friend this, that these movies love, especially with the soundtrack, they love Hispanic culture, but they hate Hispanic people.
Okay,
which
yeah.
leads me right into 4, which is the bad guys are Tuco Salamanca ripoff, and his gang TM. There's some cool. This is where it starts to get batshit. So I enjoyed some of it. I enjoyed the mine shaft chase scenes.
Mine
Other
shaft,
than that,
that's cool.
yeah, it's a mine thing. It's neat. It was a little more iconic. Way too little Michelle Rodriguez. I was looking forward to getting her back, and then they're like, "Oh," and I was like, "God damn it!"
Jesus.
Don't worry, you'll get plenty as the movies go on.
I know. I just wanted her now. I want. It's Pride Month. You can't do this to me.
It is
So
Pride
true.
Month.
Happy Pride.
Not happy enough for Nina.
No.
I think the Fast and Furious franchise are the only movies that I love that are objectively bad.
That's so fair.
Normally,
that's the X-Men movies.
Yeah, normally I can't handle movies that are just terrible, but Fast and Furious, for some reason, it just does it for me.
You're so valid. I can see why. This is definitely a series where I'm not when we were watching the early Bond movies, I was like, why am I doing this?
I could see that. Yeah.
We hit the late Roger Moore era, early Pierce Brosnan, all of that. And I was like, okay, now I'm in it. Now I'm having a great time.
Well, by the time you get there, you have to be into it, right?
No, yeah. At that point, I had Stockholm Syndrome into it. But the first, especially late Connery, early Moore, I was like, what am I doing?
That's a very rough period, yeah.
These are some of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, and I'm not having a good time. I think Diamonds Are Forever is the last good one, and then after that I just lost it.
It's like an island in the middle of a sea of bad movies on either side, really.
And then the Fast and the Furious movies, I remember something, at least one thing from all 4 of the movies I've seen. So I think that's a better track record. I could not tell you. Noah loves Thunderball. I could not tell you what the fuck that movie's about. It's got the ocean.
It's got the sharks. He likes it because we watched it a lot when we were kids, and we watched it a lot when we were kids because we liked the sharks. and the really long scuba fight scenes and stuff. We just thought that shit was really cool at the time. So it's the one that we've watched the most. That's the
I don't
reason.
know. Now that he doesn't have to edit it, I don't know if he'll listen to this episode. But he does already know that I don't like Thunderball, so I'm not gonna. This will not be a surprise to him.
That was my nickname in high school.
Do you at least concede that like Thunderball has the best opening song of most Bond movies?
Listen, Goldfinger is really good.
That's a good point. Goldfinger's hard to beat. They really opened with the best one, but
Yeah, I'll do a tier ranking at some point of the Bond themes. I promise. Not today, but
eventually.
I'll stream it. I'll post when I go live. I'll post the stream link in the horror chat, so you guys all know to come and watch me tier rank the Bond themes.
I'm legitimately excited for that. All right, so now that we've got a lengthy pause there, I do not have a ghoul to gab, but I do have the story about Varg Vikernes that I was going to tell on this episode.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking of putting it in the pre-roll section rather than in the main body because it doesn't really affect the movie or anything.
Mm-hmm.
How often do we talk about things tangentially related to the movie during our discussions?
We are laser focused on the task itself every time we make this podcast. It's a point of pride for us.
It's our hallmark.
Yeah,
honestly.
That's why people listen.
Yeah, remember all the steps.
That's not explicitly the only criticism Emma's brother had for us. When
Oh no, Dan.
Oh, is that what he said?
Yeah,
Oh,
Piper, you were
funny.
there for this.
Wait,
he was.
look,
yeah, this is when you and I went to
remember.
visit Emma. He was like, "Yeah, I've been listening to your podcast. You guys get a little distracted." I'm like, thanks, Dan.
He still listens to the podcast.
Well, I guess
Sweet.
it's
Hi,
not
Dan.
that much of a problem. So let me tell you about Norwegian black metal in the early 1990s because hot damn. So in this movie, you'll have to actually watch through the credits to know this because these songs are featured in the movie, but they're not like used really. It's or rather they're used but not featured, I guess would be a better way to say it. It's just the one character, Lavinia, listens to music on her headphones and they use music from actual metal bands for her to be listening to, which makes perfect sense. The problem is that two of the bands that they picked to use are Burzum and Mayhem. Now, this is some extremely niche information for a lot of people, I guess, but so in the 1990s, in the early 90s, the band Mayhem came to exist, and the band Burzum is just the one dude. It's sort of a not a Panic at the Disco, but like a Nine Inch Nails situation where it's just the one guy, and that's the name that he releases music under. And his name is Varg Vikernes. At the time, he was calling himself Count Grishnak, which is a way worse name, but so basically Mayhem is this band that has a guitarist whose name is Euronymous. And at one point they were getting ready to record this album that was called De Mysteris Dom Satanas, which is Latin for the mysterious rites of Satan, allegedly. I don't actually know if that's a perfect translation. But basically, when they were on their way to be making this album, their bass player, whose name was Necro Butcher, quit the band for a while, and they ended up hiring Varg Vikernes from Burzum to play bass on this album. The creative process of this album was extremely, I'm just gonna say troubled. And after they were done recording it, there was some rumblings in the scene prior to the album's release about Euronymous talking loudly and at great length about his plans to, content warning for this story, murder, his plans to take Varg and he said a lot of very detailed stuff about how he was going to do this, but he was going to kidnap him, take him out into the woods, and make a snuff film out of him.
What?
Oh my god.
And he was talking about this, like, openly.
Oh my god.
Now, little background information on Euronymous. He was a very abrasive personality. Everyone who knew him around the time says that he was, like, constantly threatening to kill people, but it just, never quite happened. This time, though, he was talking with a lot of detail about his plan. So one of those friends that he was talking to very openly about his murder plan went to Varg and said, "Hey, dude, Euronymous has been saying some really weird shit. he's been talking about how he wants to take you out into the woods and make a snuff film out of you. And Varg said, wow, that's not very cool. And he went to Euronymous' apartment, and events transpired. It was just the two of them, so we don't know for sure what happened. But what we do know is that Euronymous got stabbed in the back like 16 times.
Oh my god, what?
And also thrown down a flight of stairs. Or rather, he had all those stab wounds largely in his back, and he did fall down a flight of stairs at one point. We don't know that he was thrown even. Varg claims self-defense. Now, other things that Varg was up to around that time was burning churches. Now,
like
this
on
is
CDs,
this
like
is,
church music.
No, unfortunately, what we're talking about is an actual act of arson.
Sermon.
And when I say he was burning churches, like ordinarily for me to say that, it would be like, oh, that's based actually. It's not though, because these are not churches that were getting used with super regularity. These are like stave churches, which were built in like the 1500s, and they're constructed in a real particular way. If you Google it, they actually look really cool, and they're built without nails, actually. It's one of those like the wood's just cut to fit together things. It's very cool, and they've been standing for a really long time. So these are like cultural landmarks for Norway, right? But Varg had it in his head that the problem with this country is the church or something, so he went and started burning them down. So when Varg gets arrested, he ends up going to prison for the longest term that you could in Norway at the time, which I think was like 21 years or 24 years, something like that. Because their prison system is extremely different from ours. So like, you know, they have a maximum amount of time that you can spend there. And while he's in prison for murder and arson, he proceeds to, you know, the internet becomes common use while he's in prison and stuff, and he is able to continue releasing music as Burzum during this time, actually. But then also, he starts this blog, and on this blog, he is so incredibly racist that after he gets out of prison, and when he got out of prison was when I was in, like, high school. This was, like, 2013. He gets out of prison a little bit early for good behavior while he's locked up, right? And he moves to France, and not long after this, him and his wife get kicked out of France, more or less, over terrorism allegations. What? Because they were, like, they got flagged buying a ton of guns in France, of all places. And the authorities were never able to prove it, like, they were never able to prove intent that they were going to use these for anything. So no further prison time for that, right? But he gets out of France, and what he is doing currently, since 2015, he has not been doing any music at all, but his current thing is tabletop RPGs, which is a familiar subject for everyone in this call, I think, apart from me for the most part. His tabletop RPG is called Mifarog, and it is, from my understanding, an RPG that is about European racial superiority.
Oh no.
Yeah. This is his entire personality.
This is like the pinnacle of what people think like Norwegian black metal is.
Yeah,
Varg
the stereotype exists because of guys like Varg and Faust, as well as another one of those. And Euronymous would have been.
Had he not been stabbed in the back 16 times
exactly,
and
yeah.
mysteriously fallen down the staircase.
Everyone who knew him around that time, once again, he was a very abrasive guy. Everyone who knew him around that time, when they talk about the fact that he got murdered, most of them say if it didn't happen then, it was going to anyway. With several of them adding that Varg saved them the trouble of doing it themselves. So, like,
Jesus Christ.
Lots of things to be mad at Varg about, right? But maybe that's not one of them? Question mark.
So, weird that murder is the least of our issues with Varg.
Right?
It is an issue, though. So, here's
is.
my thoughts about Varg, and specifically thoughts about Varg in this movie.
What's he doing
Varg
here?
Is
he doesn't need to be. That's my thought.
Okay, hold on. So firstly, Varg is a deplorable human being.
Obvious.
We've established this. Yeah. He's the type of person that you cannot even follow on Twitter for laughs because he posts at such a volume. I'll see like the most heinous screenshot I've ever seen, and I will look at the username, It's Varg. It's like Varg, like
He just
9
pops
times
up
out of 10.
sometimes, yeah.
He just sometimes people I know will be like, "Oh my god, look at this crazy white supremacist on Twitter," and I look and I'm like, "Ah, god damn
that's
it,
just
it's fucking
Varg."
Varg again." It's like he's not even worth paying attention to because the
No.
shit he's saying is just always it's like at that volume. Secondly, I have a theory about why he's in this movie, but we can talk about that later.
Right. We'll see if
after
it
we've
lines
done
up
the
with
summary.
either of my theories.
It's a real simple theory. It's basically just that Lavinia is steeped in white paganism in a way that's like super it is veering into that area, and she's completely unbeknownst to her. Her parents don't know, she doesn't know, but I think it's intentional to have that be the kind of paganism that she's practicing, and I think there are clues throughout the movie towards that. So I'm interested. I think it's a critique on like how paganism is tied to that. And specifically because it's a Lovecraft story. But we can talk more about that later.
Yeah, to me it was just especially interesting that it's like a Burzum song and a Mayhem song. Like that's just weird.
No, it's intentional. That's intentional. That's
It
like
has to
that's
be, right?
that is
Yeah.
that has
That's
to be
what
at that
shows
point
that
because
there is intent. Yeah.
exactly. So anyway.
Whenever you're ready.
All right. I haven't done this in a while because I hate doing it.
That's what she said.
Hey, yo.
Oh, no. Oh, fuck. And with that, welcome back to the Casual Obsession Horror Movie Podcast, the horror movie podcast where we talk about horror movies. We're bringing in Pride Month with a story from our favorite problematic asexual king, Howard Phillips Lovecraft, as adapted by director Richard Stanley.
What, was he asexual?
He was sex repulsed, as a matter of fact, and you can see it in an awful lot of his stories.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the least surprising thing that I've learned about
Yeah, right?
H.P.
That's
Lovecraft.
the thing that makes it like especially funny to me when people make jokes about how like he would have been into tentacle porn, because I'm always like, oh god, you've got no idea how wrong you are. But also that's still a funny joke. Like
I do think he'd be into tentacle porn, but not in the way you'd think. I think he would find it horrific and intriguing. I don't think that he would think it was good. I think he'd be like, wow, that's definitely
that's
a thing
more
that I
fucked
would
up
have
than anything I could come up with.
Yeah, exactly.
So this week we are covering what year did this come out? 2019, 2020?
I think
2020.
2019. Was it
I've seen both
2019?
numbers
Noah's
listed. I
notes
don't
say
know what it was
2020.
actually. So I'm assuming it probably hit the festivals in 2019, wide release in 2020, probably.
Yeah.
But Jeff, who are we?
Who are we indeed? Well, I know that I am Jeff, and I am joined by my usual co-hosts Nina and Emma, but we are absent a Noah, and it appears that we have a guest filling his space. Is that true?
Hi, I'm Noah. But not actually.
Oh my gosh,
Oh,
it's
we
Noah.
do have Noah. Okay, my bad. All right.
Hi everyone, I'm Piper. You might have seen me before. Well, heard me before, but you're hearing me again. I'm here. Hello.
For our first episode of Pride Month, we had to kick off the straight cis one.
We need the
of
they
us
thems in here.
and bring in another queer.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Noah, you're not gay enough for this podcast.
Not gay enough.
It's okay. I still love you.
I don't.
Wow. Okay.
But
Cool.
so this
I
week,
didn't realize I was supposed to also say I love you too,
No,
And
Noah.
also with
Jeff
you.
was literally the only person I expected to say anything.
yeah, and I said the thing you should have expected from me. So,
Honestly, yes.
in any case, this week we're covering the movie Color Out of Space, which is a movie about a family living on a farm out in the middle of sort of nowhere, who is visited by a hydrologist who is surveying the area for a reservoir that is to be put there. And then suddenly a meteorite comes down out of the sky, and maybe some events begin to transpire after that. Who knows? You'll just have to wait for the spoiler section. Do we got critical reception, or are we foregoing that because we don't have Noah?
Noah, has some ratings listed here, but I don't know that they're up to date. So let me just double check really quick.
I do really appreciate that he still writes up all his notes and his usual stuff, even when he's not going to be here.
No,
So
it's really
nice. So
professional
sweet.
of him.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
Yeah, no, these look correct-ish. Yeah, I guess these are correct. They looked a little high to me, but I'll take it. Okay.
Yeah, this movie
So-
was received pretty well, wasn't it?
Yeah, honestly. So we have on IMDb, we have a 6.2 out of 10. On Rotten Tomatoes, we have an 86%.
Wow.
On Metacritic, we have a 70%. And on Letterboxd, we have a 3.2 out of 5. Also, Twitter Brandon wrote an extremely long review of this.
Did he now?
Oh.
He did.
Was it?
Twitter Brandon says I'll just read the whole thing because it's not that long.
Okay.
Twitter Brandon says, fuck, it's so good to have It's so good to have Richard Stanley back after almost 30 years. Color Out of Space is so good. It takes maybe 10 minutes too long to get going, but once it does, it's the wildest ride you'll take this year. It's gorgeous, horrifying, and mind-bending, almost everything you could ever want out of a Lovecraft adaptation. Between this and the criminally underseen Underwater, 2020 is a banner year for that. Nicolas Cage is genuinely great through most of this. In the front half, he gives a subdued, kind of square dad performance, which is pretty rare for late period Cage. Once he loses it, though, it's a little underwhelming, almost like he's just playing the hits.
I felt the opposite about his performance in this one. Actually, that's.
I'll tell you.
We'll get to it.
I'm on Brandon's side on this one, but we
Oh.
can talk about it later.
Mm.
He says, this is a must-watch. God bless Daniel Noah and Elijah Wood's Spectre Vision for bringing back Richard Stanley. Who else is going to give you witchcraft and comprehensible creatures from other dimensions and the scariest alpacas you'll ever see? So that's what Twitter Brandon says. I think he praises it a little too much, personally.
I kind of.
I thought you
agree.
said you agree with Twitter Brandon.
I agree with his
About
assessment of
Nick
Cage's performance.
Okay.
Yeah, personally for me, I enjoyed this movie. This is Nina speaking now.
Okay.
Nina's rating is, I like this movie. I thought it was solid. There are definitely things I didn't like about it. I think there were some really, really strong moments that would make me like say that people should watch this. But personally, it wasn't like that much of a standout. I'd give it like a 6 or a 7. It's like not a movie I regret having watched, but
Yeah. That's valid.
it didn't do
I'm
anything super special for me.
Yeah.
I'm surprised critically this was received better than Annihilation.
Yeah. Well, it's because here's the thing. Because it was, but here's the thing. This movie is kind of a higher denominator. It's an adaptation of a better known story. It's a Lovecraft story. It has Nick Cage in it. And it like plot and pacing wise, it's a little more conventional than Annihilation as well. Despite all of the time fuckiness, like the story's pacing, I feel goes very similar to something like Sinister. So
Sure.
Yeah.
off,
Jeff, your
Jeff.
hand is raised.
I actually think it's more because people got excited about Richard Stanley, because I'm not familiar with any of his work outside of this movie. Every review that I have read makes specific reference to how glad they are to have him back.
that is true.
So
I did just read one of
Yeah,
those.
I think this movie gains a lot by being made by more or less a legacy director that people were excited to see. Because I'm gonna give my rating last, but like I don't particularly love this one either, even though Color Out of Space is my favorite Lovecraft story.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think to save you from having to eventually talk yourself into giving your review score before the rest of us do,
thank you.
I think I have a hard time with movies that heavily feature body horror because I'm learning body horror is not always like other categories of horror are meant to try to like scare you or whatever or like kind of freak you out. Body horror is just supposed to make you feel gross and I don't like that. I don't like feeling gross. And so
That's fair.
It's valid.
So watching this, I think things were executed pretty well. Like it was able to retain my attention the whole time, but there were a lot of parts where I was like, oh God, please stop. And so my personal enjoyment of the movie is probably like maybe like a 5.5, but maybe critically could be around like a 7.
Real fast, Noah gave it a 7 and wrote a little number, but I'll let Piper go before I read Noah's little blurb.
Yeah. So I'm kind of on the other end of you there, Emma. I love body horror a lot.
We're breaking up.
Oh shit!
Oh.
We're about to move in together. We're breaking up. Oh,
Divorce.
No, I enjoyed kind of the body horror aspects of it. There's of course certain things, and we can talk about that later, that I wish there's like certain parts more of and certain parts less of.
Right.
But I think overall, there was definitely some parts of this movie that I felt that kind of Lovecraftian touch to, but there's a lot of other parts that it just kind of fell a little bit flat for me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think overall, and a lot of this is influenced by Nicolas Cage's performance, as a lot of it kind of felt tacked on in a way. Like, I want to be in more of this movie. I'm going to do all this stuff. So that kind of affected it too, but I'm on the same level as Nina there with the I think 6 out of 10 is a fair score. It was a fun watch. There's a little bit more that I wish out of it for sure though.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as Cage's performance goes, we can get into it. Because I won't get into it now.
Yeah.
It's truly, I don't know. Sorry. I don't know if you all have seen Community or watched all of Community.
Never.
I've watched most of it.
There's an episode in the later seasons where some of them take a class about Nicolas Cage. And the class is called like Nicolas Cage, Good or Bad. And it's a class trying to figure out if Nick Cage is a good or a bad actor. And Abed goes in and very quickly overwhelms himself and kind of breaks his brain trying to figure out if Nick Cage is a good or a bad actor. And this movie reminds me of that.
So here's I think why I will on this last thing I'll say about Cage's performance before we get into things. I think what ruined his performance in this, any chance that I would enjoy his performance in this movie, is stories I've heard both about The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent and Spider-Verse. Stories came out in interviews from both of those movies that Cage is kind of over it when it comes to this specific kind of performance, and was before this movie filmed. He's talking about how that's not him, that's how people remember him being and perceive him being based on his more out there performances, and they have to ask him to do that. They hire him wanting that. He doesn't give it unless asked. They did that with Spider-Verse, and then Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. People were like, oh, what was it like playing yourself? Was it hard? And he's like, well, I'm not playing myself. I'm playing someone's idea of who I am, which is even harder. So he seems like a like recently, especially, a genuinely like level-headed person who is extremely self-aware of like where he occupies space in pop culture. And that made this performance really hard to watch, honestly. Really hard to enjoy.
You will be thoroughly unsurprised to hear that his acting in this movie is specifically requested by the director, Richard Stanley. Basically, he told him, I want you to do Vampire's Kiss. And
I thought he was doing his like best either Moira Rose or Trump impression.
I definitely got the impression he was doing a little Trump there. Yeah, I definitely heard that. He just when he starts doing the voice and he's talking like this and he's just like, get out of my sight. Like, what other impression are you gonna get?
Yeah, that's exactly what I read that as. There is
Mm-hmm.
one scene in this movie that was perfect from him that I really enjoyed, and then literally everything else I was like, it hurt, honestly, knowing like the behind the scenes stuff. So, but that's all I'll say on that for now before we get into the rest. Noah says,
what's Noah say?
Noah says 7 out of 10. Had a really good time with this. The color saturation hit so hard when we would change days and witness the new spread of the color through the yard. Easily top 10 moment of 2020 horror for me was watching Cage stumble through the yard picking tomatoes while the whole world was pinkish, blown out, and a little fuzzy. Wish they'd let Cage act more like himself than a goofy caricature at the back half, but all in all, I'm more happy than not. Did it manage to land on all fronts? Nah, but it managed on enough fronts to make me incredibly pleased.
Yeah.
Fair.
So
Yeah, he's right to flag the visual stuff as the best part of the movie, right? Because I feel
the
like
visuals are really good.
Yeah, it's the visuals and the soundtrack combined are kind of what carries the movie, to me at least.
Two scenes of like well-paced like not jump scare, but like suspense and anticipation.
Yeah.
There are two like scenes that I was like really in it as far as like the build up that they were trying to pull on me. So, and then there was one scene where I really wasn't there, but we can talk about that later.
Sure. There's multiple scenes where I really wasn't there. So here's the thing. Every time I watch this movie, the same exact thing happens, which is that it gains and loses me several points along the runtime. Like, there's just several scenes where I'm like, I'm done with this. This movie's really, I'm bored with it. There's just like, it's not doing it. And then like a scene later, I'm like, I cannot believe I ever doubted this movie because this is great. And then a scene after that, I'm like, what are we doing? Can we just, and then the next scene after that, I'm like, yeah, all right. Every time, it has been exactly the same. Normally, I rewatch movies and I feel differently at some point. This one, not at all. I feel exactly the same every time I watch this movie as I did the first time. I don't know what to do with that. I feel like this is one of those like rare movies that I almost prefer just listening to the soundtrack in isolation over actually watching the movie.
I'm so interested in hearing your thoughts on the soundtrack because to me, there were a lot of points where I was like, okay, so you know that Annihilation came out.
Yeah, right? Right? So much of the soundtrack sounds like it was definitely informed by Annihilation already having been out for a couple of years at that point. Absolutely.
I'm so glad that's not just me.
Okay, no, it definitely sounds very similar, and I think, honestly, it was probably a little bit intentional, because the guy who did the soundtrack, Colin Stetson, I should wait to talk about this until later.
Yeah, let's talk about this. Emma's gone, so the mice will play it.
Yeah, right. So, but Colin Stetson is the same guy who did the soundtrack to, like, Hereditary, and I fucking love the soundtrack on Hereditary. So this is a guy who does good work and doesn't need to steal ideas. So I think it's more... I'm choosing to perceive it as an intentional reference.
I'm choosing to perceive it as acknowledgement of similarities because they're so there. You might as well just be like,
and it works thematically. It works. It's doing all the same things because they're doing the same thing. Like,
yeah, kind of.
In any case, this is an adaptation. As previously mentioned, this is an adaptation. This is why I went last, because I knew I was going to talk too much. This is, as previously mentioned, an adaptation of my favorite Lovecraft story. And I really don't feel like it's a great adaptation of it. I feel like the changes that they make actually remove a lot of the stuff that I love about that story and about Lovecraft in general, actually. So Brandon is back to being an enemy of the podcast because I strongly disagree that it's everything that you could want from a Lovecraft adaptation.
It's
this was
nothing I want out of a Lovecraft adaptation.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's nothing that I want out of a Lovecraft adaptation, but God, it's close. It's so close.
Yeah, we can talk about that when we get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's just, I don't particularly like the way they massacred my boy here, you know? I just, it's not what I was after with a Color Out of Space movie. And I know there's other adaptations that I do actually want to go check out just to find out what they're like, right? But like, I just... I understand a lot of the changes, but I don't understand a lot of the other changes. So basically, I'm beating around the bush here to say I've had a really hard time assigning a numerical value to my enjoyment of this movie, because like it does do stuff that I like. It does.
How many tentacles out of 10 then? Is that?
Everyone's giving it like 6s and 7s, and that's around where I was thinking to put it. I think I'm gonna give it a 7 that I don't feel like it deserves, if that makes sense.
It's a 7 it needs, but not deserves. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, am I mad about having watched it the number of times that I've watched it? No. Am I going to go out of my way for it in the future? Again, no. But I am probably just going to keep listening to the soundtrack for a long time, so I'm getting something out of it.
Yeah, it's not nothing.
Yeah. So that's how I feel about it.
Cool.
Yeah, so moving forward, what is it? Content warnings and then scary rating?
Yes.
Content warnings.
Noah's written some content warnings down that I agree with.
Yeah.
Self-mutilation. There's an extended self-mutilation scene.
Yeah.
It's pretty rough.
It's pretty explicit. It's
very explicit. You'll know when it's coming to.
Yeah.
Animal death. And a lot of body horror, people and animals.
Animal body horror, yeah.
So much.
Animal body horror, human body horror. Those are the main ones, I would say. Yeah. I think that's just about it, unless anyone else has anything.
I think, child harm, child
Child
death.
harm.
Yeah.
Child death.
Yeah, a lot of bad stuff happens to these kids.
Yeah.
A lot of talk about cancer.
Yeah, a lot of cancer talk. A lot of cancer talk.
Much like in Annihilation.
There's gore. There's some specific hand gore. I know some people, that's like a real thing for them. Be aware of that.
There was a point in like the first half of the movie where I thought they were leading pretty heavily into a young girl suddenly gets pregnant from alien thing.
Oh, jeez.
Oh.
Ooh, that would have been bad.
Yeah, and it doesn't go in that direction, but I wanted to mention it just as because that can be like a thing.
Right, yeah.
Yes, we're mentioning if you think it's going that way, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
But
I think potentially, and I don't know exactly what she used, but there's that one scene where she's doing the ritual mutilation, and I don't know if she's using like sage at that point, so there might be some like cultural appropriation there.
I think there probably is.
Yeah,
So here's the thing.
likely.
There's a lot of, we've talked about this, there's a lot of paganism in this movie. There's some use of white supremacist symbols. It seems like just a white girl ignorantly practicing paganism.
Yeah.
Or white paganism specifically. So please just, obviously use your critical thinking skills. This is not real, and she's not practicing responsibly. And I think that if there was any burning of any herbs going on, I don't trust this character to have done her research, and I'm sure that's, again, I want to talk about it, I think it's intentional to have her being an incredibly careless practicer of this specific culture and religion.
Nina, I love when we're talking about like somewhat sensitive subjects and you end up just casting about for a diplomatic way to say don't be stupid, because I feel like it happens every time.
I want to have faith in people who might listen to this podcast.
Right.
Emma.
Yeah.
We talked about this movie grossing you out. Did that affect what you might call a scare rating?
Yeah. So from a scary point of view, it's like 1 or 2 maybe. It's not bad. But from an uncomfy ew like rating, I'm gonna give it like a 6 or a 7.
Valid.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was one, we'll get into this after the spoiler, but there was one, I did not have a problem with most of it, but there was one body horror thing that I'm sure the rest of you can guess at that really, really grossed me out.
I think I can guess which one it was, yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely one that's just way, way worse than all the others.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's head on over to the spoiler corner.
The spoiler.
Yeah, it's summary time, baby.
All right, so...
Okay, Piper, go ahead and summarize it for us.
Okay, so at the very start, we see...
I was kidding.
There's a water lad, and the water lad now.
Right. Water lad, as he shall be referred.
I forgot about water lad.
Forget about water
some
lad.
How do you
reason.
forget about what? He's literally the main character.
I don't remember.
Main character's in like
there was
part.
Well, yeah, he's
there's
just gone
specifically.
for most of it.
Yeah. I'll talk about that once we get out of here.
Oh, you think I'm not going to talk about it first?
Corner. Oh, well.
Fight.
Fuck you. No.
I'm talking about it now. Oh. So, all right, so the movie picks up with... What does the movie even pick up with? God. All right,
narration
so, yeah,
from Waterboy.
It opens with Waterboy. His name's Ward. He's a hydrologist, but he's a Waterboy. So
Waterboy.
It opens with narration from him, and actually all his narration at the beginning and end of the movie is lifted more or less exactly from the openings and closings of the book, which I think is really cool because I love the particular way that the book is written. I think, Lovecraft's particular flavor of, just me being a cringe Lovecraft fan again, don't mind me. I think his particular choice in words and phrasing is really nice, really a poetic flavor of prose, very dense to read, which can make it kind of difficult, but I think it's very nice. So basically we open with a narration from him where he's talking about the area in the forests west of Arkham where the forest is weird because it's just never been inhabited really by a lot of people, so it doesn't have most of the marks of human presence that we find so comforting. And that's not foreshadowing anything, don't worry. So he then enters as an actual character where we get this this scene of it goes straight from there to Lavinia doing her ritual down by the river, right? Yeah. Okay. So Lavinia, who is the middle child, the daughter, the only daughter of this family that lives on this farm out in the middle of nowhere west of Arkham, she's doing this like ritual to try and use witchcraft to like prevent her mother's cancer from coming back, and Ward accidentally interrupts her and explains that he is surveying the area for a reservoir that is to be put there. And she gets very angry at him because she was not... apparently nobody was actually informed that he was on his way, and his presence allegedly ruined her ritual, but it kind of seems like by the time he even showed up, she was done, right?
Yeah, I think she's just salty.
Yeah, so I don't quite get what's going there. Maybe I'm being too critical. I'm nitpicking, but basically she heads back. We get some scenes of the farm that her family lives on. We get Nick Cage acting like this Hallmark movie dad, trying not to get her in trouble for having been out riding at a time that she shouldn't have been or something like that. There's something where like the mom is going to be
no
mad
helmet,
at
no
her.
shoes.
Yeah, the mom's going to be mad at her, and he's trying to avoid that happening. And
mom comes out and is like, wow.
Yeah, the mom comes out and she's like, oh no. And then she finds out that her son's been smoking pot with Tommy Chong, who is in this movie for some reason. What the hell? We were talking about Nick Cage. We didn't even mention Tommy Chong is just in this movie, and I cannot figure out why.
He's hanging out.
He's just there.
What are we...
But
Tommy Chong in the movie.
Yeah, just what's he doing here, you know?
Also, they identify him as the squatter, which I wish they would have talked even slightly about why they're letting him squat on their land.
What's the larger situation here? Because the character that he is more or less representing from the book is Tommy Chong's name. His character's name is Ezra in this, but the character in the book that he's kind of representing is named Ami Pierce, and he is not a squatter on the gardener's land, but a sort of distant neighbor and a good friend of theirs. And he's actually in the book the one who tells the whole story. The hydrologist is the narrator, but he's hearing the story from Ami Pierce. And the story at time of writing in the book took place like 40 or 50 years previous. So like the telling of the story is all very like second, third hand kind of stuff. Whereas this movie is just kind of like, we're going to show you everything that happened with the family. And that's not the way that it's written at all, which is one of the things that I don't like about it. But in any case, I should be getting back to this actual summary of the events of the movie. So family stuff happens. We get a couple of scenes of the family just kind of being a family, hanging out, having all the little good and bad things that all of that comes with, right? There's an older brother who seems to be just kind of a stoner, and a younger brother who seems to be pretty much oblivious to absolutely everything. And he is actually played by Julian Hilliard, who is the same kid who plays young Luke in The Haunting of Hill House.
Oh.
Yeah, that kid, I love seeing that kid in things. I like point and I'm like, oh hey, it's
like,
that
kid
from
Hill House.
Haunting of Hill House.
Got those glasses.
He's doing a great job despite everything.
Yeah, really, yeah, he's doing perfectly. I don't think any of my problems with this movie have to do with any individual actors, other than perhaps Tommy Chong. But like, my issue with him isn't with his performance; it's just the fact that he's there. Yeah, it's just what? Like, So that night, though, this like meteorite hits, and as it happens, there's this like massive long flash of this magenta light with this like sort of rainbow tinge to it to indicate to us the viewers that it's not natural, right?
Yeah, it's pretty gay. It's great. It's the bisexual lighting.
It is a little bit the bisexual lighting, just a touch. But after the meteorite hits, things basically over the following days, things start to get weird. Odd stuff starts to happen. Everyone starts to act a little bit more irritable, and eventually the mom like accidentally cuts her fingers off while chopping carrots preparing dinner. And while the dad, Nicolas Cage, is taking her to the hospital, the kids kind of are left responsible for the house for that night. And we the viewers kind of don't see any of that night at all. It's dark out, and they're told what they need to do before they go to bed. And the next thing we see, the sun's coming up, and they're doing the things that they were supposed to do before they went to bed. Which, upon like a first watch, is kind of confusing, but like. As things go on, you start to see that everyone's starting to have these weird like time dilation moments where they're just kind of sitting and doing something, and suddenly a bunch of time passes and they are not aware of it. They don't know what has just happened. And every time that this happens, they end up like, just feeling weirder and weirder. And eventually Ward like tests some of the water and says that he's found something in it that he can't really identify, and recommends that everyone. I am skipping so many things. God damn it! This is why I don't do summaries. The plants have been growing weird. It's a farm. They've got tomatoes. They got peaches, and the tomatoes and peaches are growing like bigger and faster and a month early, and it seems like things are going really great for some reason, but then like Nick Cage takes a bite from one of them and it tastes like shit, and he takes a bite from all of them and they all taste like shit, and he's so confused and angry about it. And they're also having problems with like cell reception and internet stuff, which is a massive problem for the mom because she operates some manner of unclear business over the internet. And
I think it's like a stock thing.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, she thinks she's a stockbroker.
Is that what she says? All right, because she makes reference to how like the faulty connection has her like hemorrhaging clients and stuff like that, and she has to be at it like very, very consistently, or else she will just lose everything apparently. So yeah, stock stuff actually lines up with that perfectly. Thank you. I don't know how I missed that every time.
She didn't say it, so it was actually on the screen. There's like a couple, only twice. There's like a little stock ticker that goes by.
Okay, nice, good catch. All right, so yeah, all that stuff is happening, and basically just like anything that you can think of that can mysteriously go wrong on this farm is going wrong for this family, and they're all real weirded out by it. And then it gets even weirder because I'm trying to make sure I'm not skipping too many things here. The parents are both becoming, as all this is happening, the parents are both becoming like less and less patient for any manner of inconvenience. They're blowing up left and right over all kinds of things. Nick Cage is doing something the whole time. And I kind of like it for reasons that I can get into later, but I totally understand it being a problem for everyone. The plants in Growing Weird have begun to change color. They're all changing to this magenta tint. The flowers don't look right. Leaves are all turning pink instead of green, and it's just odd. There's these weird bugs that have started flying around. And the meteorite during a thunderstorm just like attracts lightning all night. And in the morning, it's just gone. It's been struck by all this lightning, and when they go out to check on it in the morning, it has disappeared. Which, like, previously they would always like make remarks about how it like shrank overnight or something like that. But it was never like this drastic. It just got struck by lightning all night and disappeared, and they don't know what the deal is. And eventually, after things with the water getting weird and stuff, A handful of curious events transpire that end up leading to the mom and the youngest son getting like struck by this weird lightning that comes up out of the well, and it fuses their bodies together in a really disturbing kind of way. And it's sort of shown over time that her body is kind of absorbing his. Obviously, everyone is incredibly freaked out by this. They bring the both of them, they carry them inside, set them down on a couch, and then after finding that sunlight appears to be painful to them, they move them up into the mom's office in the attic. It feels as though it's just to have them out of sight because they are a very upsetting presence to have around. Who could imagine why? But everyone involved is sort of insistent that they want to get help, but then they all just keep not going to get help. And this is a theme that's left over from in the book, but it's not really like used to its greatest effect in this movie. This is the stuff that I was talking about earlier. Let's see. I am losing my spot again here.
Yeah, so they are like, oh, we gotta do something. And then Nick Cage is like, I'm gonna go handle the stuff in the barn.
Right, yeah, because something weird is going on with their alpacas, which he has because they're the animal of the future. The Mayans knew what they were about, of course, right?
Oh my god.
Even though you don't get much milk from an alpaca.
Jesus Christ.
And he plans on eating them, too? Like, what the... Yeah,
he's got a lot going on.
Yeah, they've been hearing weird noises from the alpacas all night, and Nick Cage eventually goes out with a shotgun and finds that the alpacas' bodies have all, like, fused together into this monstrous John Carpenter's The Thing looking ass mass. And you hear a number of gunshots from a distance, and you can figure out what's going on there, right? He comes back inside, goes up to that attic room where the fused son and mom are, and that's where the two surviving siblings are as well. He goes up, and the two of them are at this point, they're just like, well, we haven't heard any gunshots for a while. Hope he's okay. And then he comes in, and he's just covered in blood, and he says, leave us alone. You two get out. And they're like, what are you gonna do? And he's like, I'm gonna handle it. And Lavinia says, like you handled the alpacas? And he says, get out. So they reluctantly exit the room. He kind of pushes them out and locks the door behind them and prepares to shoot his wife with the shotgun, but then doesn't. He changes his mind. And then he, like, kisses her and gets weirder. And see this...
Just like with the alpacas.
Just like with the alpacas. See, now, the kiss in this scene, to me, is way worse than any of the body horror. Because the way that they did the makeup on her is so effective. She looks so gross. Oh, my God, in this scene. Jesus Christ. And then when they kiss, there's this, like... I don't even want to say it. There's just like strings of something between the two of them, between their lips, and it just looks like the texture would be so gross, and it makes me want to vomit. Oh my God. And then he starts...
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. And this is when the madness really starts hitting for him. Because, like, he does not show a clear connection to reality at any point in the movie after this. When he talks to her, or when he's talking to an empty space in a room that he thinks is her, he's only ever talking about, like, travel plans, things that they're gonna go do. And it seems like he's got actually a pretty detailed plan of what he wants to do, but at this point, Lavinia and Benny are kind of like, trying to leave the farm on Lavinia's horse, but the horse is too freaked out to be ridden, and it runs off by themselves. Benny, the older brother, insists that he hears their dog inside the well, because they had a dog who, like, disappeared earlier on in the movie. He says that he hears their dog in the well, so he wants to climb down and pull him out, because you're not just going to leave him down there. But as soon as he climbs in there, the color starts, like, glowing and rising up from the bottom of the well, and it kind of, like, absorbs him. And then the dad kind of like just kind of takes Lavinia and tells her that she needs to go feed her mother, and he locks her in that attic room with her. And it's at this point that we see the mix of the mom and, you know, the combined now mom and youngest son have melded in a far worse way. They've transformed into this like two-headed crab monster thing, and it attacks her. Meanwhile, Ward, the water boy, and the sheriff have kind of finally come back, because Ward's been having his own little like side story with Tommy Chong this whole time, where he's been kind of like half figuring out what's going on and not really understanding anything, but knowing that the problem is in the water, more or less. So he comes back with the sheriff, and they are able to break into that attic room just in time to save Lavinia right before Nathan walks in and shoots the monster, killing it. And when, what, does somebody like ask him why he did that or something like that? He says something about how they weren't his family. Whatever the prompt was, he says that they weren't his family. And then he just like wordlessly walks back right out. And he sits down at his big chair in front of the TV. And when asked at that point what's going on, he says that he's just like sitting with his family, and they ask where his family is, and he points to like the empty couch beside him. And he's like, my family's right here. Clearly, you know, just not connected with reality whatsoever. What? This is a part of the movie that's like especially fuzzy for me. Like when I get to this point, everything that happens is like surprising to me. And I'm like reading a synopsis right now, and I'm like, is this really what happens? Is this the order of events? Like, even now? So, according to this synopsis that I'm reading, Ward rushes Lavinia outside as the color emerges from the well. Nathan attempts to shoot it, but the sheriff mistakes Nathan's aim for Ward and shoots him fatally. Lavinia insists on staying with Nathan as he dies, so Ward and the sheriff leave to evacuate Ezra. They get to Ezra's house and they find his like desiccated corpse and a recording that he left behind on Memorex, because nobody would believe him unless he got it on Memorex, he says. In this, he more or less says that the color is attempting to remake Earth into something that is akin to the place that it came from, because the place that it came from is so unlike here that it doesn't follow the same set of natural laws that we have, that we're familiar with. As they head back to the farmhouse, a mutated tree kills the sheriff. It just kind of like grabs him and lifts him up, and we never see him again.
Oh my god.
It's at this point that Ward does like a dumb little video game move. Did you catch this? He has a flashlight in his hand. The sheriff has a shotgun with a flashlight attached to it. As the sheriff gets pulled up by the tree, he drops the shotgun, of course. Ward turns around, and when he goes to pick up the shotgun, apparently his inventory was full, because he does something that no person in real life would ever do. He just drops his flashlight on the ground and fucking leaves it there. You turn it off and you put it in your pocket, you moron. What the hell is this? His inventory was full, I guess.
Yeah, no space.
But he rushes back to try and save Lavinia, but when he finds her, she has also entirely lost touch with reality. This synopsis describes her as fully possessed by the color, which then explodes out of the well and starts to like funnel into the sky. Ward is shown a vision of where the color hails from, which is a psychedelic exoplanet inhabited by tentacled alien entities, before Lavinia disintegrates. As space and time begin to unravel, Ward enters the farmhouse and is pursued by a murderous apparition of Nathan. He hides in the wine cellar as the color's distortion of reality destroys the property, leaving Ward as the only survivor. He climbs out of the remains of the farmland, which is now a colorless, ashy, blasted heath, this thing says in quotes, because that's the quote from the story. They did not have to write it like this. God damn it. So then we get an epilogue with Ward far in the future, where he's standing on top of the finished dam overlooking the reservoir, and he delivers another, just a closing narration that is also borrowed from the book, about how He is glad to see that place buried under so much water, but he will never drink it. And then the credits roll.
We did it.
Yeah, we got through that eventually. Sorry, that was such a mess. I think it's just the way the movie is, though.
There's a lot.
Part of it definitely is just the way the movie is.
My favorite part was when after the meteorite hits the next morning, when like the police come to like investigate it, they're like, "Hey, hydrologist person, what do you think of this?"
Right?
And he like leans down next
he
to it and he's like,
randomly.
"Yeah, this meteor must have like disintegrated, blah, blah, blah." And the rest of the time in the movie, when somebody asks him like a question or does something thinking he's a different kind of scientist, he's like, "Actually, I'm just a hydrologist."
Yeah.
But like in this one instance where they're like, "Oh, meteorite, hydrologist, what do you think?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I know about meteorites and space and everything, of course."
Yeah, he's like ready to rock. They're worried about it being radioactive and stuff, and he's just like, "Well, no, generally speaking, stones from space aren't any more dangerous than any rock from anywhere else." And they're like,
It's a special interest.
Clearly, this is just something that he
so,
knows
yeah.
about for other reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have two things I want to say off the bat.
Let's go.
Firstly, my favorite line in the movie, and Noah says this isn't as bad as I made it out to be.
Okay.
But it is my favorite line in the whole movie because historically the color is a color. It is a color that humans are not capable of perceiving usually. Like, it's undefinable.
Yeah.
Usually how this is portrayed in modern media is as magenta, because magenta technically is not on the visual spectrum. It is an absence of a color as opposed to an actual color. That's why you can't mix it when you're painting. I found that one out the hard way while I was trying to paint the Bi flag one year. Fuck, dude. However, my favorite line in this movie is Nick Cage describing the colors says, "There was a pink flash. Actually, I don't know if it was pink. I've never seen a color like that."
Yeah, he says it was like pinkish, or at least I think it was. Actually, it wasn't like any color I ever saw.
It's like,
dumb.
which
It's
I
dumb.
I really wish they just had left out the pink thing entirely. Just let us, the audience, like think like we're not seeing what they're seeing. Like, we're seeing our best approximation of it. Just don't have him say pink.
Yeah, just have the color not be diegetic.
Literally, that's it. That's all I would have liked.
Apparently, there is an earlier German adaptation from 2008 that tackles this issue by having the rest of the movie be in black and white.
In black and white,
and then the only thing that's in color is the color, and it's magenta.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch
thought
that
this movie was
sometime.
going to be like that too, and it wasn't. Okay, I actually have two other things. The second thing is the brother could have been gone. You could have given all of his parts. The older one all of his parts could have been given to Lavinia, because his death scene wasn't that interesting.
He's really a non-presence in most of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it would have given her relationship with Nathan a lot more if the things that he's like yelling at her about are the things that he like told the boy to do. Like, because that gives her like, it gives their relationship more weight if he's asking her to do things and she's not doing them. Because currently it's like he asks her to do like two things and then yells at her.
Yeah.
If he was asking her to do things and then time was fucky to her and it wasn't getting done. And also his death scene was such a nothing. It was like my least favorite death scene in this whole movie, because it's like,
don't care.
How stupid are you going to be to go after the dog? Get out of here.
Right? Like
third thing, and this is something that like might lead into more discussion, so I left it for last. I don't love how the color is done in this. I've always seen, so it's been a long time since I read the short story.
Right.
I'll put that out
I
there.
read it yesterday.
But
so.
Yeah. So I've always felt with the Lovecraft that I've read, but specifically with this, that this is more of a corrupting force. So I expected most of the horror to come from the body horror and from the madness, which are the Lovecraft staples. I did not enjoy the physical representation of tendrils chasing characters around. I didn't love that as a like cosmic horror thing. That's what kind of took it. That, and then the kid being like, my friend's in the well, are what took this from being like cosmic horror into being something more like haunting adjacent, where it's kinda. Like there's, but that's something that I was curious about y'all's thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting that they chose that they Noah is here. That's why we said hello.
But he's not. But he's not.
I was gonna say the listeners are gonna be real confused about that.
Hello. Do you want to say
I'm
hello? So he's back from work, but he's tired, so he's not gonna be here.
Hello.
Hello.
What are you doing Noah's notes yet? I can guess for Noah's notes.
No,
we're not still there yet.
Do you want to guess for Noah's notes? Go to bed.
Not really.
We're like real early on. I love you.
See you, everyone. Have fun with the movie.
Oh, I know.
There he goes. And he's gone.
But yeah, it was interesting choice for the tendrils, I think, to have. In terms of just like visual, yeah, that was great. But yeah, it's just like my friend in the well. It's just like, what? You have like 50 different things that you're doing right now, and everyone has like this different, I guess, a different effect that it's taking on them. I also think they, at least for the mom, they put like the mad aspect in Madness in terms of she was just angry most of the time.
She's just super irritable. Yeah.
Fix the dish. Yeah, because she was mad that the internet wasn't working.
Yeah. That's so true, because like both the parents were angry. When it comes to Lovecraftian madness, what I want to see is kind of what Lavinia and Nathan were going through specifically. Lavinia more than anyone else. I really like the desperation that she was clearly feeling and the way that she turned to her like really rudimentary understanding of religion to try and fix it. Yeah. I liked that was one of our opening scenes, was just showing that like that's what she turns to for comfort, and that it has to be for comfort and not real, because she's like praying about like cancer. It felt that I really liked that was our like religious character was not turning to like Christian gods this time, but to like a similarly like rudimentary understanding of a different religion. And I liked Nathan, and I liked his like typical like horror movie madness where he's just like spacing out and shit, and saying garbly gook. But like the mom was just pissed.
It really feels like they just didn't they didn't want to write her better. You know, like they had already written the other arcs, and then they got to her and they were like, I don't know, she'll just be mad and stuff. Yeah, and then she'll get struck by lightning and reabsorb her son and transform into a monster. Boom. All right, no more dialogue for her. Let's go. Like, that's how it feels to me.
It also feels like the way that she's portraying her character in different scenes before even the meteor hits is just different people. Like when she comes out with the horse, she just seems very kind of like a bit spaced out, because she doesn't focus on the fact that her daughter was on the horse sort of thing. She's just like, oh, this thing. And then she goes upstairs and she does work, and then she comes down, and then she's a completely different person. Yeah. And it's like kind of this ever changing like entity sort of thing. And then the meteor hit, she cuts off her fingers. And it's like, why did this happen? What led to the point where she cut off her fingers?
There's no lead up to it.
I feel like they stripped out a lot of things that made her character who she is, because there could have been something interesting in terms of like, why did she act like this when she first interacted with Lavinia that we saw, and then why was she different coming to dinner? It's like, there's obviously something going on there, but they just completely like you hauled out any sort of character building.
Yeah, and like this is sort of a larger thing with the family to me, because like I kind of feel like a lot of the issues that we see with the family are decently portrayed, and you know, we get enough information to kind of like, you know, get what's going on, where the tensions are and stuff like that. But like a handful of the issues, I kind of just don't get them. Like it feels forced. You know, but and like especially when you combine it with the way that like in the first couple of shots that we get of Lavinia riding into the yard and stuff, and we see the farm for the first time, and the music swells and it's like comically idyllic sounding, and it's like, look at this beautiful farm that this beautiful family has this beautiful life on, and then we get like, you know, Nick Cage doing his like Hallmark thing, and then we hit the dinner scene and it's nothing but arguments. And it's like, well, okay, what's the signal we're trying to get here? And is this a happy and idyllic farm life, or do they hate each other? Pick one.
It It really doesn't feel intentional because I like stuff like Sinister and like Insidious, other movies that like I feel are comparable with like the family dynamics. It feels like there's a specific tone they're going for, and like it would, that like idyllicness of it is very obviously a sham. But in this one, it's like they it feels like they're kind of painting by numbers on the like our family has to have conflict thing. We have a workaholic. We have someone who has like parent daddy issues. Nick Cage has daddy issues.
The one parent who always works, the other parent who can't cook but has to all the time, and the kids hate his cooking.
We have the product placement for McDonald's.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We have the
stoner brother,
the responsible sibling, the stoner brother, the little kid who hears voices. It's like, I don't know, man. It feels very paint by numbers, and I know that, like, I don't know. I actually don't know anything. I'm kidding.
Like, that's exactly how I feel about the family dynamic, though. They're just such the paint by numbers is the best phrase for it. They're such a paint by numbers movie family. Also, just to jump backward to the tendril thing, I kind of hate that. Because like, to me, in the book, I'm going to talk about the book so much because it's what I care about.
I really want you to.
I hate
Please
how
do.
annoying it is to have a person who's just constantly being like, well, in the book, but like, I'm going to do that.
It's not in this specific case because it's a short story. So it's like there's not that much to adapt, and except for like the vibes specifically, and I think the vibes are what they miss the most.
Right. And with Lovecraft, what matters more than the fucking vibe? God.
Genuinely.
So in the book, the family, I feel like they could have had like minimal alteration to an awful lot of this movie and had it be way better. But like in the book, there's no indication of the family actually having real significant issues prior to the color arriving. So it kind of feels like to start off with that like comically idyllic Hallmark thing could thematically actually be perfect, right? So then when the corruption happens, it's like, oh, this is how bad it gets now because they were in a different movie before. And like, you know, like, but shit, what was it I was about to say when I started talking about the book even? God damn it. Tendrils. Okay, so in the book, it is actually more or less stated by a couple of characters. Like, nobody ever actually knows anything in the book, right? But the characters who say the things that you can assume to be the most true are definitely of the opinion that the color is a, like, conscious, sentient, you know, thinking, acting thing. But the way that it thinks and the way that it acts is a lot more passive than the way that it's shown in this movie.
Right, like Annihilation.
A lot more like in Annihilation, except in the book. Okay, so a lot of the adaptation, a lot of the change in the story from going from the book to this movie is putting it in a shorter time frame, because in the book, this story takes place over the course of like a year and a half. This thing takes its sweet time sucking the life out of everything. And the way that it happens is everything gets weird first. And they have like, you know, the farm has like, it hits in June, and then the farm has a bad harvest that fall, even though the fruit was all like extra big and it looked like it should have been good and they bloomed a month early, blah, blah, blah. But then it all tastes terrible and they aren't able to use any of it. And then like the next spring, like over the winter, the snow never collects as thickly over there. And in the spring, the snow melts fastest there. And then when the plants come in, they're all like weird. They're all fucked up. And of course, that fall, their harvest is terrible as well. But by the time it even gets to fall, most of the plants in the area have stopped being fucked up in the weird colors way. And they've all like turned gray and brittle, and they've gotten crushed to dust. Over the course of a year and a half, this happens, rather than stuff happens for an ambiguous period of days, maybe weeks, and then an explosion turns everything to dust in this movie. You know? I
think everything happened in like a week.
It seems like it, right? But the passage of time is so hard to track in this one for a number of reasons, which is appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
But like, it feels like it's not very long. Because, like, Ward shouldn't be there surveying for the reservoir for a particularly long period of time. So it stands to reason it's probably within a week. That sounds right. That's kind of what I'd been assuming as well.
Yeah, because as far as I understand from how they described it, because I guess it's an egg in some way, because
it's
I think
compared
that's where...
to an egg in the book.
Yeah. I think because the egg is in the well, I think what they mentioned is that the closer you are, it's like the event horizon, and basically time stretches on, which is why time's really fucky there, because time kind of extenuates, which is why they're not really sure, and we're not really sure as an audience what's going on, when the timeline is. But outside of that, all of this is happening very quickly. It's like literally a week, but it's extended in there.
Yeah. That's a good enough read of it, I'd say. Yeah, it sounds pretty similar to the way that things work in Annihilation as well. But
they're actually the same movie.
Great drinking game for this episode. Every time we mention Annihilation,
well, that's the point.
It is
though.
the point. It's why we did it. Right? But yeah, the way that the madness is described in the book as well is extremely different. Far more like slow creeping kind of thing. It's just kind of like, you know, after a while, after like the crop fails and stuff, it feels like the family's mental health just never quite recovers. You know, they all just seem kind of bummed out perpetually. And if you ask, they don't really expand on why. And then like over a longer period of time, they get a little weirder, and they start to be prone to these fits of not fits, but like this tendency to like just kind of stop what they're doing and stare off into space, as though like listening intently for something. And when asked, they would say they are listening for something, but they can't quite say what it is. They'll say something like they expect there to be something that they will have to listen for, or something like that. It's like, it's really weird and really vague and stuff.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And like, that's the thing that Lovecraft, because like Lovecraft does this really well.
He does.
And I like Ito does this well as well. Is just the by having your main character, and the movie set itself up to do this, by having your main character not be someone who is directly affected, by having your main character be observing. This is like Uzumaki Junji Ito.
Yeah.
Having your main character be someone outside of the people who are having this effect, you get to see it happen slowly. I love it in Uzumaki because you first see it with the main character's dad, who is becoming obsessed with spirals. You see this kind of escalation from him, and then you see naturally how it affects his mother, and you don't see his mother's thought process, but you see his, and him realizing that there are spirals in places that if she ever saw them, like, would absolutely wreck her and ruin her. And he's like, she's terrified of these, I have to hide them. And then we don't like hear her thought process, but we can see it from his point of view the moment that she realizes, oh, there's a spiral in my inner ear, I need to get that out. Like
I haven't read Uzumaki yet.
Oh, it's horrifying.
It's horrifying.
I knew it was
that's
something
why
to do
I
with
mentioned
spirals,
it. It's because I needed to punch. That's like it's a punch, and like that's something that I think, like, having a lot of horror come from a kind of narrative perspective of an outsider, of like, you know, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where she has this all being heard from someone who's talking to Victor about it, you know, just kind of having someone who's like, this sounds unbelievable, and if I were not hearing it, if I were not telling you this right now, I wouldn't believe it myself. I think this movie suffers from that because it sets itself up with Ward pretty well.
Yeah. I love
him. Like,
he's
kind
great.
of,
he's perfect.
and it works really well in a couple scenes. Firstly, I think it's really interesting that one of the strongest scenes of just kind of seeing these characters as the weirdos they are is before anything technically happens. It's the interview scene with Nick Cage on TV.
I love that scene so much. That's my favorite part of the whole movie.
He's just not tracking what he's saying. He's not paying attention and stuff. And if we'd had more of that, of characters coming up and trying to talk to this family, like you were saying, If we were seeing Ward's investigation process, because a lot of horror from the Lovecraft era is investigations, people stumbling across clues as to what's happening. If we had Ward going back to check on them and being like, I found something new, and they're just getting weirder every time he goes back, that's what I expect. And then later on, that does happen with the Stoner character, where like that's one of the most effective horror scenes in this movie is coming in and hearing the tape playing and finding him dead. And it's like, that's really more of what I would have wanted, and less of the trying to cram in,
trying to show you stuff.
Like
that's exactly. The problem. It's the book relies so much on almost none of it actually being witnessed firsthand, you know, and like even the stuff that is witnessed firsthand, you're hearing it secondhand because it happened 40 or 50 years ago, you know, like so much of the book is about the distance from it. It's like
and that's woven in with the color being something you cannot see.
Exactly.
It all comes from something that you cannot witness directly, and then no one has witnessed it directly. Everyone's just heard stuff. And then this movie is like, oh, but what if we showed you literally every step of the way?
Every single piece of it. Yeah. Like this and Annihilation both get really focused on the way that it like fucks up animals and stuff. That's not in the book hardly at all. There is reference to every winter after that, the animals' tracks in the snow look a little weird, but nobody can quite place what's wrong with them. And that's as far as that goes. Just that they find tracks in the snow that look a little fucked up. And something's clearly weird, but they don't know what. Also, you were talking about it, things being investigation focused. This story, the book at least, is so sci-fi forward. It's the kind of sci-fi that's heavier on the sci than it is on the fi. It talks for so long about the team of scientists who get a sample from this thing and they take it back to Miskatonic University in Arkham and they test on it all night and they go back out the next morning to get another sample. And it talks about everything that they do with the samples that they take. And there's just a ton of focus put on all of that, the testing and the not being able to find anything about it. The stuff is magnetic. So the meteorite itself in the book, you were talking about it being sort of like an egg. It's compared to an egg, but it's not like directly analogous to an egg. You know what I mean? That's kind of like the closest thing that we, with our understanding, could have to it, right? But the meteorite itself is made of some manner of metal that is apparently so soft, so pliable as to be described as almost plastic. And they go to like chip samples off of it and they end up just like gouging and cutting instead. And it's magnetic, but beyond that, it has absolutely no reactions with anything at all. The stuff just will not interact with other substances.
That's why at the very end, when Ward pulled out the compass, it was spinning, but they never explained that.
They don't get fully into it. There's a lot of stuff in here that's reference to the book, but it's just not quite giving you all of it. It's a movie for people who have read The Color Out of Space, but it is not properly The Color Out of Space. You know what I mean? But then as they go back like the second day to try and get extra samples, because the one thing that this stuff does react with is silicon. They put it in a glass beaker overnight and it disappears, the beaker with it. There's just like a scorched spot on the shelf where they left it. That's the only thing it reacts with. It destroys silicon. So they go back for a second larger sample the next morning, and when they go to cut that sample out, they find like a pocket inside it. And the pocket that they find is the color, which the whole thing has had the color, right? But this is like the greatest concentration of the color. And it appears to be like, you know, they kind of like tap on it, and it appears to be like hollow and brittle by the sound of it. So then they like hit it with a hammer, and it crunches and disappears. And they're like, oh, well, that's weird. But this thing was pretty small, actually, and the rest of the meteorite was rather large. So we should be able to find more of these things inside, right? So they try drilling, and they don't find more of these things inside. And it's after that that the like lightning storm thing happens, and the whole thing disappears. And they're like, well, I guess we'll never know. And at the end of the story, Ami Pierce, the storyteller character, sort of theorizes that there were two more in there. one that escapes at the end of the story with the light all going up into the sky, and one that he kind of like sees attempt to rise into the sky and fail and come back down. So then it's kind of referenced that like local folklore of the, you know, the people who avoid that area, they say that the barren area where it happened, which on the Gardner farm, which is referred to as the Blasted Heath, because it's just this, you know, lifeless, ashy wasteland. They say that it is expanding by like an inch a year, very gradually. And the theory is kind of that the one that escaped was able to grow strong on all the life that it was able to absorb, because that's what it does. It sucks the life out of everything. And then it was able to grow strong enough to escape. But then because after that, everyone on Earth just avoided that area and never went back, and animals don't go there, and there's no plants left and stuff, the one that's still there has been like starving the whole time and hasn't been able to get strong enough to accomplish anything.
It's like slowly going,
yeah,
like trying.
Just gradually, the rate that it can manage to expand its influence at.
Mm-hmm. I love that though.
That's tell great. You what, the story is so worth reading. And it's like, it's literally like 10 pages of text. It's so short and it's so good. I love it.
And the movie kind of fumbled the ball.
It's just...
Well, so here's what's interesting to me is you're telling me the book is mostly science, and then you're also telling me that
it's half
the scientist is the character that we... Half science. And the scientist in this movie is the character that we see the least of. You're telling me we see every step of the sample like testing process, and then in this movie we hear something's wrong with the water.
So
I believe
that's because Ward is actually present for the events, whereas the nameless narrator in the book is never present for anything. He's surveying the area for a reservoir, and he walks through the Blasted Heath and says, "Wow, there's something weird going on here, huh? The locals sure weren't kidding when they said this was a strange place. They told me this place was evil. They said that in Arkham." Like, when he says all that stuff, like that intro of the book is entirely just him talking about various rumors that he heard in town before heading out to check this area out. And then he's like, yeah, I went to that place and it was fucking weird. They were right about everything. And then the story actually gets told because all the locals that he talked to in Arkham told him not to listen to this one specific guy because he's crazy. So, and literally the next line is like, so of course I sought him out the next morning. And he just goes straight to him, and that's Ami Pierce, and that's where he hears the story from. And the perspective character for all the events of the actual story is Ami Pierce, but it's all just through the filter of him telling it to the nameless narrator, who is the reservoir guy. In the book, when the meteorite strikes, the people who go out to investigate are not the mayor and a couple of cops. It's a team of professors from the university. So like there's just a lot of things about the setting and events.
Another thing.
Very frustrating to me. It's so frustrating to me. Why did they not call a scientist? What is this, insane clown posse?
Right. Well, here's the thing. That's a problem that I have with this movie as well that feels like a paint by numbers is the like, we have a problem with the local government thing where it's like the local government's trying to cover shit up. And it's like, look, this is not the place for that. This is not the story for that, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
and
there's places to there's things that we need to be focusing on. And those things are the characters' individual story arcs, which we get disgustingly little of because they don't know who's the main character.
It doesn't have one.
Like,
no.
If we look at like Sinister or Insidious, you can be like, oh, well, it's an ensemble cast.
Sure.
No, it's not. The dad's the main character in both of those. Yeah. And it feels like the dad's going to be the main character in this one. And then they're like, just kidding. Lavinia's the main character. And I'm like, okay, I'm on board.
And then
Lavinia's
like,
the main
no,
character.
You thought Lavinia was the main character? You moron. Ward's been the main character the whole time. He's the narrator.
Literally only in a third of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there was supposed to be more to do with Ward. I feel like there was more. Like,
for a movie that's as long as it is and that drags as much as it does, it feels like it's got a ton cut out of it. What the hell is it?
You know what they could have cut out? All the youngest child just like sitting there in the yard just staring at the well. Stuff. They could have cut so much of that out because there was just so many shots of him just like sitting and staring, and it's just like what is happening here? This is
not as creepy as you think it is. The little kid thing is not as creepy as they think it is.
No, we expect it at this point. All of us do.
Yeah. I thought there was going to be something like interacting with the kid based on the fact that he was the one who woke up in the night. Like he was screaming. They wanted to bring him to the hospital. He was staring. My friend's in the well. Like there was so much to do that was really going forward. Like this kid is going to interact with this entity at some point.
Yeah.
But and then Lavinia was the one who did.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, it should have been, I feel like in that case, it should have been the kid who was basically like, I'm the one giving you the vision of what you will see. But no, it's like, I'm going to fuse with my mom. Like,
yeah. And that is not in the book at all. That's not even remotely near anything that happens in the book. So obviously for it to be put in here, it's put in there on purpose. I've got no idea what purpose it's serving. I don't get anything out of it.
Scared.
So here's a big problem that I have with this movie. It seems to be trying to do themes, but the themes all come out of nowhere without much setup. They're like, oh, something cycle of abuse with my dad. No, where, how, we have something
it's just like a
keep
setup
the family
and a reminder and no payoff with that arc.
Yeah, right. Something keep the family all together except for the kid in the well, I guess. Huh? Maybe he's like, there was a thing about isolation because he's a stoner or something, or like the mom not wanting to let Lavinia go or anything. But no, that was never there apart from like a throwaway line either.
Yeah. We also had the plot with the "Would you love me if I was a worm?"
Yeah, there is that.
Would you love me if I was a worm?
Yeah,
which we kind of got like some payoff with the smooches.
We did get with the smooch.
Was terrible.
That was awful.
Well,
and then Lavinia being like having like weird worshipy stuff also just feels like they didn't devote enough time to it. They heard that a story is 3 acts, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So they did a beginning and a middle and an end for all of those, but they didn't do any of the stuff that like ties the arc together. Yeah, like they're like, here's a scene where Lavinia prays to the gods for help. Here's a scene where in the middle of things she prays again, and here's a scene at the end where she prays to the alien instead. 3 things, so it's a story arc, and I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's like it's full of motifs but not arcs. Because, like, you mentioned the cycle of abuse thing with the dad. He does that, like, impression of his dad's voice, and then later on just starts talking like that every time he gets worked up. And then it doesn't go anywhere. The mom has her whole thing.
I'm not my father.
Yeah, the mom has her whole thing about work, and we definitely see the way it's, like, driving a wedge between her and the family, and then it never goes anywhere. We get a little bit of stuff about the older brother being like kind of a stoner burnout, kind of a loser, kind of a weirdo, and like it never goes anywhere. We get stuff with Lavinia, it never goes anywhere. We get stuff with Ezra, it never goes anywhere. Like nothing does anything.
The only thing that I found interesting that they did do a callback on, and I think they meant it, I don't know, and it's kind of harkening back to the whole Event Horizon thing, is when the parents are at the hospital and then Lavinia calls.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like the mom and the dad are like yelling at her over the phone. And that's basically because the next day when they're in the kitchen with the tomato in the garbage, the yelling happens. And I think that was that conversation over the phone. And then the whole thing where it's like, what are you doing? Why are you sitting there? He's like, I'm with my family. And it's like, basically it's like things are kind of repeating in a way, as like the whole timeline stretching out, things are getting mixed.
Okay, get this. This.
Yeah.
The second phone call that gets fucked up, I heard very clearly, you hear Nicolas Cage's voice shouting, feed your mother, the same way that he says it later on.
Ooh.
See, that's cool.
That's cool,
like,
right? The movie really does
like
a cool thing here and there, right? But it can't tie them together.
No.
Like, it worked really well, though. I like that.
It did. I would have liked more of that. Yeah. There's a lot of movies that, this actually leads me to something that I've never talked about before on this podcast, but I've seen a lot with a lot of these more, like, have interesting ideas movies, where the Tumblr fandom, we all know I go on Tumblr while I watch these, the Tumblr fandom will romanticize the good parts of the movie, blow them out of proportion, and make them seem like they were done on purpose and really well. For this movie, I saw a tweet or a Tumblr post that was like, wow, I love Eldritch Horror Through the Eyes of a Child. And then it had like Coraline tagged, which is great. And then it had some other stuff, which also I would agree with. And then it had this movie. And I'm like, you are so full of shit. If you're like, wow, this movie was a great version of Eldritch Horror Through the Eyes of a Child because there was a child character and an Eldritch Horror. Like,
yeah, that's it. It's just the presence of both.
Yeah.
Some people really latch on to mediocre media and like turn it into something that it's not, and I'll kind of do that with this.
But like, The Brave Little Toaster fits Eldritch Horror Through the Eyes of a Child better than this movie does.
100%.
Like
Toy Story in ways,
in some ways, for sure, actually.
But like,
it hits it.
Yeah.
I think children's media does Eldritch Horror Through the Eyes of a Child better than anything
Really?
else. When
Yeah.
you watch a piece of kids media and you're like, wow, this is kind of fucked up,
Yeah,
actually.
you ever watch Rugrats? God damn.
Yeah,
Right.
Holy Hannah.
Good show, though.
But with this story specifically, I think the thing that I'll like blow out of proportion, because it's the only reason I can think of for Varg Vikernes being involved.
Right.
Is,
Yeah.
is the idea because I didn't look into I am not pagan. I'm gonna throw that out there. I do not practice. I have friends who practice. I am a little bit aware of certain things not to do because I'm involved enough that like I know what some of the symbols are that you should not ever have around. I know some of the like practices you should never that are closed for other cultures. I don't early on she's doing her little prayer out by the river and Ward comes up and he does another fumble of his, damn it, Jim, I'm not a fucking astrologist, I'm a hydrologist.
I'm a water lad.
I'm a water lad. She's like doing her thing and she's like, you wouldn't understand, I'm a pagan. And he's like, oh, this like kind of group or that group.
Wiccan or Alexandrian, he says.
Yeah, and he gives her the benefit of the doubt and says Alexandrian because I know one thing, and that's that Wiccans are bullshit.
Yeah, Wicca only got invented in like 1978 or some shit, right?
Yeah, by
some white dude.
A dude who was in it for the pop culture of it all.
Yeah, who just made up a bunch of bullshit about ancient stuff that doesn't exist, and yeah.
So when he says, oh, Alexandrian, I read that with my limited knowledge of him being like giving her the benefit of the doubt and being like, oh, white girl practicing paganism, I hope to God it's not Wicca. And then she's like, that's your second mistake. And I'm like, oh, she's Wiccan.
Yeah, she's so snotty about it for no reason.
She's listening to Varg. She's carving like runes that are iffy into her body. Like, this is like, to me, reads as a very interesting version of the child messing with shit she's not supposed to, but just like in an ignorant way. She thinks she's so mature and she's the first person to ever figure this stuff out and she's going to be the one to save the day. But realistically, she is the most childish version of this mature thing that she's found. But I feel like that in a better movie, those themes would have been really strong. And I also think that the intentional, I think that was intentional and thematic on purpose. And I also think that was one of two intentional thematic shits on H.P. Lovecraft for being a racist. The second one is naming a cat G-Spot.
Oh, that okay.
was
okay. That was pretty. Okay, yeah.
Really
I hadn't even thought about the cat. When that happens, once again, every time I watch the movie, I get to the part where they introduce the cat, and I'm just like, why? What? She's there for one scene, even. It's not even like she's a presence.
Two, actually, when they almost hit her with a car.
Right, yeah. And it's
I think that's to shit. I think naming a cat a stupid thing is a deliberate
and it's a
jab
black
at
cat
Lovecraft.
even, so it's like, yeah, that has to be intentional. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are my two.
Okay,
Did you have another one? Because I love jabs at H.P. Lovecraft.
I thought, actually, because I wasn't paying super close attention to the paganism stuff,
okay.
I thought the racism subplot of this movie was about Nathan, the dad. There's a couple of points where he just sort of says things that have me looking at him at an angle, not necessarily stuff that means anything, but stuff that, like, raises an eyebrow, and he does it multiple times. So I'm like, is this movie saying that Nathan's a racist? When Ward approaches, Ward, one of three non-white characters in the movie?
Mm-hmm.
Nathan meets him and says, let me guess, Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And this is after he's already demonstrated an intense dislike of cities and city folk. And I grew up in some rather rural conservative circles, and lots of times the reason those rural conservatives live out in the middle of nowhere is because only white people live out in the middle of nowhere. So to me, I see that comment and I'm like, oh, are they saying Nick Cage is a racist in this movie? And then after that, later in, like, I think maybe the same conversation, when he tells Ward about Ezra, he says, yeah, you can go down and see him, but I can't guarantee he'll talk to you. And he says it with that kind of delivery where it's like, oh, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
And then he gets there and Ezra's incredibly cool with him about it, because why would he not? And it's just like, well, all right, what was that? And all Nathan says to clarify that remark is to refer to Ezra as being special. And what the hell's that? That's nothing. And none of that goes anywhere because Ezra is cool with Ward immediately. So what was the point of that?
And everything that Nathan said, it's like, oh, we can't find Ezra. We haven't seen him. And it's like,
you haven't looked. He's just right there.
Lives. Like he's right down there.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we haven't seen him. And then the kid's just like, yeah, I'll show you where he is. Like, it's like...
it's like, it's not
why don't you just talk to your son?
It's just... He's just there.
Then again...
But...
Yeah. Then again, through the entire movie, Nathan just has displayed just not caring about his kids. And caring about his wife.
Yes.
Because primarily his drive is his wife.
Yeah.
Like, every time it's like, go feed your mother. Like my wife sort of thing in general, and there's no concern for the son. Like, the son was the one who's facing the back of the couch. Like, all this stuff.
They don't talk about him
like,
very much at all. They make reference to the two of them as a unit. They make reference to her specifically. They don't talk about him.
Yeah. Oh, but it's kind of foreshadowed earlier because when, like, the kid isn't doing well, like, right after the explosion, and then the mom's like, we need to take, like, our child to the hospital, and then he's just like,
yeah.
And it's like, don't you care about your son?
Right.
He is not doing well, and he's like, So it's very much, he's never really cared about the things the youngest.
It feels like there's kind of this thread running through the movie where the parents regret having kids, to me. And a certain amount of a certain amount of the stuff that I'm complaining about is stuff that I can trace directly back to the book, because a lot of the city distrust stuff is actually directly from the book. There's a lot of talk in the book about how city people have such a tendency to dismiss and mock the issues and concerns of rural living because they have a greater tendency to just laugh at those yokels than actually want to address a real problem. And lots of times when people who live out in the middle of nowhere talk about weird stuff happening, the city people will just kind of laugh and say they've lived out alone in the woods for too long and they see and hear things, and they don't go investigate things that they should be going to investigate. Like, that's stuff that you find all over the book. So I can see why it's in the movie, but the way that it's utilized in the movie is like, are you going to do something? Are you going to do something with it, or are you just including stuff from the book for the sake of including stuff from the book? In which case, why are you changing so many things so drastically from the book? Like...
I think the one thing that I enjoyed that seemed like a necessary change, because if you're going to set a story in modern times, you gotta like adjust for modern tech.
Sure.
I liked all the TV and phone stuff.
Yeah, cool.
That worked really well for me. I think it was well utilized. I think it worked with the themes. 10 out of 10. Yeah. No issues there.
Unfortunately,
the radio when they come to Ezra's place, works.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it also sets up another character thread that gets dropped, where Nathan is always sitting down in front of his TV, and then the TV, once he has flipped it to his favorite climate change denial station, the TV goes all magenta on him, and it's like, oh, okay, are we setting up a thing about people immersing themselves in opinionated echo chamber media and how it poisons your mind and makes you stay in places that you shouldn't stay. And that's why he just sat there and died while The Color was doing all its weirdness, right? Because that's another thing that kind of comes in from the book. A question that's asked toward the end of the book is, why did Mr. Gardner just sit there drinking the water all that time when he clearly realized there was something wrong with it? Why didn't he leave? And there's talk of how, like, when it's affecting you, you know that it is affecting you. You know that something is coming and it's going to be bad for you, but you can't do anything about it. And that makes it feel almost as though it could be adapted really easily into a story about, like, how being conservative rots your brain and kills you, right? But, like, the movie doesn't do that.
Yeah.
It sets it up and drops it. Like,
No, 100%. It does that so often, and that's what's really frustrating. It's one thing that I do love, though, just in general, is the trope of a character sitting in front of a television and nothing's
totally.
on.
It hits every
God,
time.
it
I love it.
The Color is actually just based and won't let them watch Fox News.
The Color said none of that.
Not allowed. Blocked. Parental blocks.
The Color did nothing wrong.
There is, to quickly kind of spin back to that beginning scene where she's doing a little ritual thing. And there's something that when Ward looks down at her foot, there's like that little, like the circle with the star on it. The thing that I think would be cooler, especially to tie later on when, the mom creature was like on top of her and just not doing anything, just
being menacing.
What would have been cooler, and I really think they should have done this, instead of the pentagram, they should have put the elder sign on her foot instead, because it's like eldritch creature, there's protection sort of thing, and that would have made sense to
and
me.
we see the symbol on her book that she reads from, so like it's there, it's in there as a reference, but like it's not doing anything with it. Also the pentagram on the foot just gives us this, like, not gratuitous, but certainly unnecessary foot shot. And I'm always wary of directors who put those in.
Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, exactly. This one's not nearly as bad as the average Tarantino movie, right? It doesn't even approach the tamest Tarantino foot shot, but like it's still there and it doesn't need to be, and it affects nothing. So what's going on?
Yeah, they could have done something with that, and it's just like, why didn't you?
Yeah.
Could have been cool.
The movie is dense with dropped plot threads.
And maybe, quickly circling back to the whole conservative thing, maybe that's why Nicolas Cage in his like dad voice did the whole Trump impression.
Right, yeah.
It's like, maybe that.
Yeah, that was part of what had me thinking that. That and his climate change news and the subtle hints that he might be a little racist. It's like, well, okay, this is all kind of lining up here, actually, but then it doesn't go anywhere with it, really.
But then it doesn't. It fails to stick a lot of landings, which is like, to bring it back to Annihilation, since we haven't mentioned Annihilation.
Drink again.
I think Annihilation sticks every landing for me. I think every character arc ends exactly how it should. And watching something like that and then watching something like this, because like there are a lot of movies that really struggle to land character arcs.
Sure.
But then there's sometimes you watch a couple movies in a row and then you watch a movie that like really fails at aspects those other movies succeeded at, and you realize that movies you thought had nothing in common actually do have something in common. The Fast and the Furious movies.
Okay.
The Fast and Furious movies.
They too are about family.
They stick landings for character arcs. They set shit up and they deliver. And it just goes to show you how fucking easy it is actually to land a character arc in a movie that has a lot going on that doesn't really have to do with those character arcs. Like, you just need to, in scenes, remember what, this is me as a writer. When you are writing a scene, you need to keep in mind what is going on with the world at large, what is going on with the group dynamics, and then what is going on with each character personally and individually. And this movie does not do... It feels like it picks one of those things to focus on in each scene instead of thinking about all of them at once, because you have to be thinking about all of them at once. Annihilation does that well. Fast and Furious, honestly, the big problem with me is that Fast and Furious sometimes forgets about like what's going on with the world at large. Sometimes I feel like I'll be watching a movie, one of those movies, and it'll slap me like, oh my God, this character is supposed to be dead at this point. I forgot that character died because the other characters, like, arcs are so focused on like what's happening right now that they're like not acting like a character that they love just died. But like, this movie doesn't even get it right on that level a lot of the time. And if a character has multiple motivations, specifically Nathan has like 3 things that he has going on. He has love wife, kind of, he has daddy issues, and he has I want the farm to do well. And in each scene, it really feels like one of those things is on his mind. They never intersect. They never really, there's like maybe one scene of daddy issues and love wife intersecting, and maybe one of daddy issues and farm intersecting. But usually when he's interacting with any of the other characters, it feels like there's like one thing on his mind. 4, alcoholism. Okay, I forgot about alcoholism.
Actually, you can consolidate a little bit, because I do think the farm thing and the daddy issues thing kind of tie together, because it is indicated at a couple different points that he didn't want the farm. Actually, what he wants is to travel, but he's settling for farm life and trying to do well with it because he's doing it just because it gets him out of the city. Because like when he's talking, we have some intersection with a love wife scene there where they're like outside while the kids are washing the dishes after that one dinner, and she asks if he would still love her if she was a worm. And he says, well, what she says is, I don't know how you can be interested in me anymore. And he humorously says, I've always been a leg man. And when they're both done laughing about that, she says, well, so would you still want me if my legs got cut off? And this is a glorious scene from him, because I love his delivery of all of his lines. He's just like, well, it's a little kinky, but... And then he says he could fit her in his carry-on luggage and enjoy her wherever he goes. He's making reference... terrible, but he's making reference to a desire to travel. And then after the madness hits, he is talking to this absence in a room about his travel plans with her. And it's another one of those, it's just a setup and reminder thing, so it doesn't really do anything, it doesn't go anywhere, it accomplishes absolutely nothing. But it does tell us that what he really wants, actually, what he would be doing were he not so tethered, is he would be traveling. And it feels like the thing that's tethering him isn't actually even the farm, it's the kids. Once again, the movie does not do much with this.
Really seem to hate the kids. I wish, because like her being melded with the kid, there's so much interesting shit that could happen,
right?
If you picked a theme of like the kids being a burden. You can pick that theme. Each kid has a reason they're a burden. There are different levels of burden. We already see hints of this, and then like when the kids are starting to like figure shit out for themselves, like I don't know, it seems really kind of flip-floppy on whether or not the mom wants the kids around.
It seems like she cares a whole awful lot about Jack the youngest and is consistently only frustrated with the other two.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I would like to I don't want to rush you guys, but I would like to wrap up a little bit here.
We are running a bit long.
I do want us to remember that we do have like 15 minutes of me telling stories that are not appropriate for air.
It's closer to 20 actually. I was watching.
Oops.
Hey, peek behind the curtain for y'all. But I do have some Noah's notes here, so if there's anything else anyone else wants to touch on really quick,
I can't guarantee I'll be quick, but
We'll try.
Can I talk about the soundtrack real quick, just before we hit the notes?
Totes.
It's, as previously mentioned, it's pretty similar in several aspects to Annihilation, but I think that's just because human attempting to make inhuman music can only go so many ways, you know? Like, if you want to make a sound that's going to sound like the sounds of the Beyond, we're only going to come up with so many different things because we are limited in our ability to do such things.
It's honestly more interesting to see what different people from different eras thought Inhuman sounds were,
actually.
because every time we find a new instrument, we're like, whoa,
like, oh man, this
so
must
freaky.
be what aliens play. And it's like, well, no, that's still from here, actually. That's not very far away.
Yeah.
And it's still just a stringed instrument. It's a zither. Like, that's not even weird, dude. Like,
They're like,
play
I
those
think
in West
what's the one
Virginia.
where you like do your hand shit and it makes noise? You know.
It starts with I no, it's
I think
like
it starts with a T. Yeah, like
is that
Theremin.
one?
Wee wee wee.
Yeah,
Theremin.
The instrument that you play by not touching
the
it.
wee wee.
Yeah, that's the only one where I'm like, okay, I don't know how that works. I find it fascinating, and it does sound kind of alien to me, but all the other ones, I'm like, that's just synth, my boy.
Yeah, it usually the way it comes across is like, yeah, this is just weird synth music, and but this one does do this kind of like, I don't know, make you think about light spectrums kind of thing sometimes. I mean, maybe I only think that because I'm used to hearing it while watching this movie, but like, I think my only problem with this soundtrack is that there's so little of it. Because this movie is an hour and 50 long, and the soundtrack is 45 minutes of music. That is under half.
Interesting. That is insane.
nothing.
Yeah, normally you get a 45 or a 50-minute soundtrack on an hour and a half long movie. There is just vast tracts of this movie that doesn't have any music, and I feel like they could have had a little bit more. For as much as they went ham on the visual stuff, it feels like they could have told Colin Stetson to really go for it a little bit more as well. Not necessarily even to go harder, but just to have more music going.
Mm-hmm.
That said, what's there, I love.
My favorite part of the music was the squelching and crying and like groaning.
Oh god, that was so
song.
good.
I think it was done by MGMT. It was really good.
Oh, I love MGMT when they do weird shit.
I have not listened to enough MGMT, I think.
This is all a joke, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully everybody's picking up on that.
Well, I wasn't joking when I said I haven't listened to enough MGMT, but...
The moaning and okay, back to serious,
Right.
because I did fall for it and I'm gonna pretend like I didn't. There's an Onion headline floating around that made me think of you, Emma. That's it also made me think of my husband, but it also made me think of you. The Onion headline that says, "Zing, I just got you with another one of my trademark complete lies."
Can you please send me that?
Yeah, I will.
I need that for comedy purposes.
Yeah, 100%. But I did love the sound effects for the kind of just noises that the mom-son hybrid were making. It was very off-putting. I loved how even when they weren't in frame, we were aware of their presence because of just the noises.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they show them little enough that you don't see flaws in the effects, but they show them enough that you think it looks great, and they keep you thinking about it when you're not looking even. Like that aspect, really well played. It's well done. For what, though? I still can't figure out why they have that stunt going in the movie in the first place.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that, like, especially tying back to when Lavinia got sick in the kitchen, is just, it harkened back to like, oh, radiation poisoning, but it's some sort of like radiation. I think that's what they were trying to go for with like the cat that was like no fur and looked horrifying, the melding of creatures together. I feel like they were trying to go for more of like, this is like radiation burns, radiation sickness, that sort of thing. And then for some reason, the people being melded together, it's like, okay. And then the sun part, I'm like, is that like more radiation? Like, it's not like the color, like, I was gonna say the color purple, the color out of space, radiation. So it's like, no, bad sun radiation.
But that doesn't really,
exactly
that doesn't really make sense. Why the sunlight thing? What's the deal with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they vampires?
I can only assume it's just an excuse to put them upstairs.
I think so too.
I guess so.
It's like literally just have Ward come by and be like, "Oh my god, he can't see this."
But like the attic that they put them in has a window as well, and they don't cover it up, so
there's still sunlight.
What's going on there?
I think the other indication for radiation is just that the mother was like losing clumps of hair too at that one point. Yeah.
Yeah, like they just decided to throw some radiation stuff in for flavor, or
it was a little sprinkle, a little sparkle.
Which to me, it's like, why would you do that when you could be more faithful to the book and have the madness take them, and then their body turns gray and brittle and they crumble to dust under their own movement? Like that's so much more effective, even just that. It's like so effective from a body horror standpoint, even.
Yeah, you could do so much with that. Very like. If you think, what is it? No, not Ex Machina. The Machinist. With Tom Cruise being like, woo. You could do something like that as they gradually like get more like brittle and gray and just thinner in general as the life's being slowly sucked out of them. Because that would be really cool. I like the body horror aspect just because
it's effective,
I'm like,
and
body
it's
horror
cool
fun.
And it's well done for sure.
Yeah. In any other movie.
Yeah, exactly.
That it was really relevant. Would have been
honestly.
Great.
So notes?
Should we head over to Noah's notes?
Noah's notes. Okay. So, Noah says, the vibes of this intro are pretty great. Immediately followed by, LOL, wait, did they really just read like the first 6 paragraphs?
It's a selection from the first 3 paragraphs. They skip over a few things. There's the second paragraph has a little racism in it, but it's all like white on white racism though, you know. He's just talking about French Canadians and Italians and Poles, but like you're still not gonna say that stuff in a movie, like.
Honestly. Noah says, are they drinking water from an open well? Confused. I might have missed something. Seems unsafe.
They got nothing covering the well. What's the deal with that? Yeah, exactly.
Noah says, lots of triangles here. Many people pointing out the triangles.
It's 2 triangles, I'm pretty sure. And I was actually following that because I thought it was like a plot thread comparing like the daughter and
Wouldn't
the mom.
That be fucking nice?
Okay, so last night while I was watching through this movie again, I decided that because I wasn't finding cool things to talk about in the movie itself, I was just going to start making conspiracy theories about the movie, which is how I find some of my reads sometimes of certain movies. And with this one, with the triangle thing, the conspiracy theory that I came up with was that it was a sort of compare and contrast thing that it was trying to do with the daughter and the mom, where the daughter's a little bit more progressive, whereas the mom's a little bit more old-fashioned with a lot of her values, the way that she talks about the way that she's dressed when Ward is around and all that kind of stuff. And also the triangles in Lavinia's scene and the mom's first scene specifically are like kind of juxtaposed to one another in a very like contrasting sort of way, because Lavinia's is like pinned to her, it's in her hair, and her triangle is like, you know, you look through it and what you see is her. It's filled, it's full. Whereas the mom's triangle is the window in her office, and she is like separated from it and she's facing away from it. And if you look through that triangle, you see nothing. It goes out to the sky and you don't see anything through it. So I felt like that was kind of indicating that Lavinia was getting a lot of like personal fulfillment from the practice of her witchcraft, whereas the mom was losing herself in her work. The movie does nothing with either of these concepts, so you know, if that's intentional, all right, but
yeah, I wish, but I don't think so.
No, I wouldn't say that's actually a thing. I would say that's something I made up for fun while I was watching the movie. And if I need to do that, then maybe there's something wrong with the movie.
The other thing I thought they were going to do some sort of callback to was the bucket. Like, it's like, the bucket won't go down the well. I thought they were going to do something with Benny.
What was that?
Like, you're going down the well to rescue the dog Sam, I think it was. And that's like, oh, Chekhov's bucket. Like, they're gonna try to go down and he can't get up because the bucket doesn't come down.
Is something finally going to come back?
Right? And I'm like, oh, well, damn, I didn't even get to see like his meats, like just him as just like just a meat person stuck to a wall.
Shut up. We didn't get a wall person.
I wanted a wall person so bad.
So, do you want to hear about what happens with the son who dies in the well in the book?
I would love to, real quick.
He goes out for water and never comes back.
Oh.
uneventfully, and then later they find fragments of 2 skeletons in the well. The second one being a different brother.
I thought he was going to get Nina Tuckered.
What?
From Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Oh,
the little girl that
shit,
gets
I always
combined with the
forget
dog.
that we, share name. There are like only a few Ninas in pop culture. There's Nina Simone, who I am not worthy of sharing a name with, and then there's Nina Tucker, who I forget about until it's a really inopportune moment.
I haven't seen enough Full Metal Alchemist to know about that.
Good. Okay, yeah, no.
It's like
actually,
right at the beginning.
We're not going to even talk about it because if you ever watch it, I want you to be taken completely off guard by it. Okay.
You'd love it.
You would.
I look forward to it, I guess.
So Noah says, if I had my legs cut off, would you still love me? 1,000-yard stare from Nick. Noah says, that's him. The color out in space.
That was him. Yeah, he's right.
True.
Noah says, a meteorite? Whoa. Well, frankly, what do you think falls from the sky usually?
Well, a meteor was too big. It would have caused much more destruction if it was an actual meteor.
100%. It's way smaller than the one in the book, too.
Decimated.
The one in the book is like 6 feet across, they say.
Oh, God. Yeah, that makes sense.
Really slowed down.
I will not get into old school sci-fi stories about
sure
impact, because like something War of the Worlds original book that I had illustrated something. Noah says, oh my God, she's listening to Burzum, 3 red flags.
Did he just recognize it when he heard it? Oh my, because it's like, it was a Burzum song and a Mayhem song that I didn't recognize the titles of even. Did he just know it?
Potentially.
Wow, Noah's getting canceled again.
No, he didn't know it. He knowed it.
Well, here's the other thing is, Jeff, you did post the credits to the chat before he watched the movie.
Oh, that's my bad then.
So I'm not going to give him enough credit.
I couldn't see something like that and not tell somebody about it, you know?
No, and I'm glad you did. Noah says, Howard Pissboy Lovecraft rolling in his grave that they named a cat G-spot.
Incredible.
Pissboy. Noah says, I do love that the stone, in parentheses, egg, I bet, is cycling through the various colors to try and convey it's not just supposed to be pink. Here's an interesting thing I'm just now thinking about. The color and Pennywise actually have a lot in common. I kind of like how Pennywise does the whole, like, appearing as different things to different people thing versus the whole, like, color you can't perceive. It does a very good job of kind of communicating the same idea of, like, situational horror.
Anytime you see a similarity between Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft, you can bet that the reason is just because Stephen King read a ton of H.P. Lovecraft. He's been pretty open about it.
No.
Derry, Maine is basically
it's
just
Arkham,
Massachusetts, but it's in Maine. It's the same shit. Is.
The chain goes H.P. Lovecraft, the chain goes racism, H.P. Lovecraft, Stephen King, Mike Flanagan.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Wait. Where does misogyny enter
and it gets
for Stephen
slightly
King?
better every time. Okay, so it's like there's like filters that it has to pass through. So it passes through racism and Lovecraft, then it passes through misogyny and Stephen King, and then it passes through religious trauma and Mike Flanagan.
Okay, yeah.
Makes sense.
Noah says, well, I like bourbon, though this is actually from Texas. Me, it's so incredibly me.
The whole TV interview is so funny. Like,
it's so funny. It's literally how Noah feels. I love Noah. That is how he sounds if you catch him off guard and try and ask him questions.
Like, that's kind of my favorite part about it. Is just that, like,
catch you off guard.
Like,
yeah.
If you just grab a person and start asking them a bunch of questions, like, chances are they're gonna sound stupid. That's just the way we all are, right?
Right.
And he's just
it's like when
so perfectly awkward.
Noah says, sorry, this is really funny.
Yeah.
Noah says, watching a man listen to static on his headphones. Oh my God, another Burzum song. Noah says, why is that toad not magenta? Everything else is disappointing.
Yeah, actually.
Right? I want magenta toad.
Yeah, like, why is the toad not magenta? Very good point, Noah. Noah says, can't wait to see what the alpacas look like, immediately followed by, oh, a flesh lump, delightful.
Those were nasty.
They were.
Loved it. I loved it.
Noah says, are we just not going to get a good... This is a good one from Noah. Noah says, are we just not going to get a good view of mom and son? Because if that's the case, that's good. Oh man, it was so horrific, it was indescribable, but in video. Immediately followed by, damn, we do get to see. It was cooler what I didn't know, but okay.
Yeah, the more intermediate parts of the process are done really well and they look really good, but then once we hit the full crab monster form, it's all like CGI and it doesn't look so great.
Yeah. Noah says, oh, we get to see the alpacas too. Just a lot of disappointment that we get to see. One thing I will say about the alpacas, this is Nina talking now, is that I really enjoyed that for the CG, because we were talking about The Thing. And if you look at some of the practical effects in this movie and you look at The Thing, it's very similar. But when you look at the CG in this movie, it's really, really stylized and cartoonish in its proportions. And I love that. Both G-Spot when we see her when she's about to get run over and the alpaca lump are not attempting to look exactly like real animals, and I appreciate that. It just does make it kind of discordant with the practical effects we do see, because the practical effects are very realistic. So it doesn't look like those come from the same monster, honestly, is my only thing. I wish they would have stuck with the cartoonish elements all the way if they were going to do that. But I do like the stylized CG. I wish that more people would lean into stylized and not try and look realistic all the time. Especially in Lovecraft, because it's like, why shouldn't it look rubber and weird?
And especially in The Color Out of Space specifically, where there's, you know, occasional talk of things just being a little bit wrong in a way that you can't place. And it's like, well, what would be wrong in a way you can't place in real life more so than something that seems cartoonish and stylized?
Like the Uncanny Valley.
It's like, well, yeah, this thing is kind of put together correctly, but it's like, it's weird. It's wrong.
100%. Exactly. Noah says, more just talking about... Okay, so this is actually interesting. Noah says, Lamau, wait, is that a controversial rune on her forehead? That's really interesting considering she's also a Burzum and Mayhem fan. It's a rune that just means cleansing. Yeah, and there are other ones without the actual Nazi implications. Maybe she's a different one. Lamau, get fucked. And immediately followed by, I don't think that she's actually part of that group. I just think she's too stupid to know what elements of paganism to get into and what elements she should be avoiding. So, and we actually talked about this only briefly. We had like a 5-minute phone call before I had to start my shift today. And we touched on this, but I didn't know how like in sync we were on this until I read these notes, but I fully agree, obviously. Noah says, oh yeah, that's a good shot of the rune. It's definitely that rune. Unfortunate. Noah says, pink reached critical mass and ate all the rest of the color. And that's like the last note from Noah. But yeah, those were Noah's notes. All very interesting. A lot of talk about liking the effects, which I think we can all agree on. This was not a bad looking movie. I think. I still think Annihilation looks better, but I liked what this movie did.
I kind of wish that, you know how they had pink cat or pink purple cat, pink purple, I was going to call them llamas, alpacas. They should have had pink purple mom child. But she was gray.
Yeah. That was disappointing.
Like, they had that little aura under their skin and their saliva.
That was
true. That's true.
I don't know. I wish it had been a little more prevalent.
Yeah, there's a handful of like...
But I agree.
There's a handful of like more subtle color things. Like every time Nathan goes to pour his bourbon, he starts with the ice and you always see that little like rainbow refraction in the ice cubes before he pours it. Like it's a neat little subtle thing. And I think that stuff's all done like real good. But I feel like they leaned...
Here's a question.
They lean too much on something subtle when so much of the movie is so overt visually, right? But like, it's a weird mix.
So here's a question for the class, and I'll extend this to viewers as well. So this, going back to Annihilation uses stuff like that really consistently. It uses its soundtrack consistently. A lot of its themes are really interesting. A lot of the way that it shows like the patchy fungus, the weird plants, like a lot of it's really visually striking and unique. But it does all do things that this movie also kind of does. Do you think this movie was like really, really harmed by the fact that Annihilation came out first? Do you think that like because it doesn't seem okay, see, because it doesn't, you get, they both,
I think they're
Piper
different.
and Jeff
I think they're
heads.
different enough to not really be stepping on each other's toes, honestly.
Okay, but here's the thing. We talked about how we think the soundtrack is
That's
deliberate. True. I think there are deliberate, like the fuzzy, like sporiness to a lot of the late color environment. The constant, like the rainbowness in the water when we see the water running, which is similar to some of the stuff we see in the Shimmer. It feels like it's limiting itself because it knows Annihilation exists. Ooh. It feels like all of these nods are at this point, it's like, yeah, we know Annihilation exists, but it's like, it's like by acknowledging, oh, it exists and we're not going to try too hard to do anything different because we're aware that this is a similar story. It feels like they've sort of put like shackles on themselves and kept themselves from actually trying to innovate because they were like aware of Annihilation.
Yeah, maybe you're right, actually.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like I feel like they could have done away with a lot of the like shimmery stuff. The set design was beautiful when it came to the plants and the wildlife and stuff like that. That was freaking gorgeous, stunning. But like I feel like if they leaned heavier into, I don't know, I'm just really obsessed with the whole Event Horizon thing. Like that's really if they leaned more into that.
It's so unique and fun. Because it's also the way you described it and how you had read it is so different from how Annihilation does it, because Annihilation really just does it extremely subtly. None of the characters really remark on it after the first time that it happens. We just see that Lena has lost a lot of weight by the end of the story. And then in the framing device, they reference how long time has passed. So we know that it's continued to happen, but it's not really one of Lena's biggest concerns, so it's not talked about, and it's not that big of a deal thematically. In this movie, in Color Out of Space, this whole like stretched time thing, the fact that the characters are like doubting their own sanity because of time blindness, personally, I find that really scary. Yeah, that's like something that like is one of my like another one of my stupid symptoms along with memory loss, where it's just like, to me, I am aware that this happens to me and it always freaks me out when it does because I don't know how, and I hate that it happens. And to watch other characters dealing with that would be so interesting, and it is even interesting when they kind of do it here. And I also wish they had leaned into it a little more, because I think it could have been interesting. Maybe you could have done themes about, you think your kids are a burden and you want them gone, but then time passes and before you know it, they are gone. Ooh. And like
that would have been good.
Yeah, it feels like the movie doesn't acknowledge the time thing enough for it to be a thing that it's doing, kind of.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Anyway, that was my question for the class, and I'm curious at what the audience thinks as well. However, it is rather late. Hour has drawn nigh and whatnot. Thank you guys all for listening to us discuss this movie. I have been Nina. You can find me at Nina Wolverina. I do art. I wrote a book. I wrote a second book. It's coming out August 1st. Be Afraid. Everyone else.
Wait, but what's our next movie?
We don't know. Do we know?
I don't think we've even discussed it, actually.
No, I don't want. I was just gonna say we'll announce it in the server probably.
On
Twitter,
record something
I can't
during
think of
the
anything.
edit and just put it in now, and we can all pretend that we just said a title. It's gonna be The Babadook.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's such a great movie.
Whoa,
I'm so
I
excited.
look forward to that
movie.
greatly.
I haven't seen that one.
It's gonna be so good.
Or if it's an old movie, fuck.
Yeah, we might be looking forward to it with trepidation or excitement.
Yeah. We'll find out. Because we don't know. But yeah. Also, you can find the podcast at Casual Horror Pod, I believe, on Twitter and also on Tumblr. What about our lovely guest, though?
Oh, hi, I'm Piper. You can find me at Maddie Matihi on Twitter or Matihi on Twitch if you want to watch me play gay pirate shit every other Saturday.
Woo!
I do TTRPG stuff. And yeah, that's about it. That's me.
Nice. I am Jeff.
Who are you?
I am Jeff. You can find me on Twitter at BubbleWubbadab, on Tumblr at What Is It You Pray For, or on Letterboxd at The Fakest Fan.
Nice. And I'm Emma, also known as Emma Panada. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Emma Panada. I'm also writing a TTRPG called All the Witches. You can find information about that at allthewitches_ on Twitter. Sorry I was quiet for most of this episode. I've also been working because there's a big deadline coming up.
Woo!
Extenuating
We love big deadlines.
But thanks so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
Goodbye.